And hello, everyone. We should be live. What's up, gamers from all over the globe? I'm sure. I'm Spike Vegeta here with my good friend Ghost Kumo, and we're going to have High Spirits here as well. We're going to be going over this upcoming amazing event, RPG Limit Break 2023 in-person remote event with one of the coolest gaming schedules, especially for RPGs, that you will have maybe ever seen. And we decided to have a little show here, just getting to talk about all the games, get to break a lot of them down a little bit, and talk about why we're so excited about it and why you should be excited as well to watch all these various games, donate to NAMI, an amazing cause. And yeah, Ghost Kumo, you excited to be here?
Yeah, this is something I think we've kind of wanted to do for quite some time. So Ghoul and I, Ghoul02, for those of you not familiar, and Spike, we're all good friends. We've done many shows, doing like a predictions list for Games Done Quick. Spike, I know you and Ghoul in the past used to do a show talking about, limit break submissions back when there weren't nearly as many.
It was much easier. There were like...
It was much easier.
Yeah.
There was like 80 games, whereas, now we're dealing with like 300.
Yes.
We don't envy you on that, High Spirits. And so Ghoul and I, we've run our prediction shows the past few years, and since then we have become, staff ourselves for the event. And so obviously didn't want to do like super heavy prediction show kind of stuff just because we don't want to like step on any toes. But we are always looking at the schedule. We're RPG enthusiasts ourselves. Ghoul actually helped out quite a bit on the back end. He unfortunately was not able to make it to this show. He has a tournament out of state that sounded like he did fairly well on. So
he did.
I
didn't bother asking him. Okay, good.
He said he made top.
Better bring home the prize money if he's not going to be here. Hopefully, we
got to make up for it, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So with us,
card game tournament, if anyone was wondering. Anyways, go for it. Yep. Sorry.
Relevant to the channel, actually, it is the Final Fantasy card game, which Ghoul actually really likes and enjoys. But yeah, so we have Spike here, kind of filling in. But I'm sure he needs no introduction for a great many of you. And then we also have High Spirits here, who is as of 22 has been on the RPG Limit Break Games Committee for who's one of the people who looks at everybody's submissions and decides, what games that we want to have on the schedule this year. And then also a few other things like what games, we have on the backups list. And I'll just say, like, I went into this submissions pool this year thinking there are going to be just an absolute banger lineup. You could probably make like, 5 or 6 just fantastic mutually exclusive schedules off of the runs that were offered. And so it's always a difficult process to make cuts for an event. And yeah, it's saying something when Ghoul and I are looking at the games that got in, and we were hyped for several of the backup runs because they're like, we like the schedule, and we liked these games, that didn't quite make it in, but might make it in depending on circumstances, knock on wood usually, and might get in at a later point. So like, first of all, I will say this, like, if you submit to these events and you didn't get in, keep submitting. Trust me, every games committee I've ever been on, we appreciate when people offer and we take note. So
yeah, definitely.
Go ahead.
Whatever happens is just remember, everyone gets a fair shot. You never know what we're thinking that year. You never know what gets submitted. You never know because sometimes it's like, we're going to do things a certain way, and we take some wacky games. And even before I was a part of the committee, I've even submitted games that I thought were, just like outliers and had no chance to get in. And somehow I found myself in too. So it's don't want to talk about Dragon Song too much.
I was going to say the two words that come to mind are like the two games that come to mind are Lunar, because you ran Lunar 2 at the very first Limit Break. And I know, like, in talking to Ghoul, he was surprised, but he very much enjoyed that run because I think he was like host or tech for that run.
Yeah.
And then Lunar Dragon Song. God, how was that game made?
But yeah, just remember is the only way you don't have a chance to get into a marathon is to not submit.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah, never truer words stated than that. And I want to get a little bit. So, again, we're going to here pretty soon just start going through the schedule, breaking it down usually day by day, trying to talk at least a little bit about each game, some of maybe like the incentives you can look forward to and everything, doing some deep dives on a few games here and there. But before that, GK and I, we are lucky enough to have High Spirits in the call with us, again, a games committee person. And if there is anyone in this world that is nerdier about a game submission process while not actually being a games committee member in any speedrunning marathon, it is two of the idiots in this call right now, GK and I.
Yeah.
We have loved doing, like GK was alluding to earlier, we have loved doing our prediction shows, trying to kind of get in the heads of games committee members, what they could be looking for, what the process is like. I mean, GK, you've done some of your own marathons as well. High Spirits, we'll kind of do just a little bit of a back and forth here from GK and I,
Sure.
interview wise. So the first one I guess I'm just going to start with here is just this one specifically is an RPG speedrun marathon. For you,
Yeah.
I just want to ask, what do you think makes a great RPG speedrun that you want to be showcased at your marathon?
That's a tough one to answer because there's a lot of things that go into it. Like, so when we're talking about in the case of like a charity marathon here, we want to have some really solid, like entertaining commentary. We want to have glitches if possible, fun strats, things like that. We want some games that, that people know, the series that are beloved by the majority of people. But like personally, I'm a fan of the little guy, of the wacky games, the lesser known games. So I like to have like a good smattering of games in there that like people might not have heard before, which look great. Like a game like Wildermyth. That's one of the ones that we got on the schedule. That is an unknown game from a lot of people. But it is a fabulous looking procedural RPG and RPG dungeon maker and story maker. Like it procedurally does everything, and then like, the smaller games, the like games like Eternal Sonata, ones that a lot of people might not have known growing up. So me personally, I like to have like a good mix of the stuff that people know, and then the lesser known titles or the indie titles that also might have some of those glitches like Chained Echoes, or might just have fabulous commentary and runners.
I love your answer there. Just to allude on that a little bit, I always tell people, if you're ever looking at any sort of a speedrunning marathon schedule and you get to something that's not Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts, Chrono Trigger, whatever, you see something, you're like, I've never heard of this game. That's probably a sign that it's a really cool looking speedrun, because you have no shortage. GK was talking about there's like 300 submissions that you all had to go through and pick out about 50 of them to be in this schedule. You could have taken any of those. What stood out about these lesser known titles, they're probably a really cool looking speedrun. But
yeah, they either look cool or they are just great runs, just go check them out. Like go check them out on Steam or, Xbox or whatever console these games are on.
Yeah, and the thing about RPGs is a lot of times what you'll find a leaderboard of like 2 or 3 people for some of these more obscure games. You ask them about these games, they will tell you how much they just adore these video games. Like RPGs as speedruns tend to be very passion project in nature. So one thing I did kind of want to ask, so this is your second year on the RPG Limit Breaks Games Committee, although you have had experience doing Questing for Glory, which, for a while was like a mainly for fun, just showing off a variety of RPGs marathon, and, was kind of a charity online marathon for a couple of years there. And I'm kind of just, curious what all of you like learned from 2022 and your time with Questing for Glory, and kind of how do you apply that to making a schedule for 2023, which was the first year that we didn't have like the deferral system that you've been on, because last year we obviously had runs from 2020, which for various extenuating circumstances we weren't able to have an event until 2022. So kind of we have a fresh clean slate there. But yeah, like what all of you learned and applied from your past experience on games committees and applied to this one.
So the good thing is like throughout my years, is before I was even questing for glory, there was a little known one that my Twitch family, the Moon Bros, put on called Scrubathon.
I love
Which
Scrubathon.
I'm sure like someone like GK or someone who's been around, because it's been a long time since Scrubathon. But like from going from that into questing for glory, our goal was to not necessarily try to find that mix of the popular, well-known stuff and then throw in a bunch of good, classics and goodies and lesser known titles. Ours was just, let's overall find the best runs. We'll make sure that everything is covered and just try to put on the best show that we can, and with regardless of anything. And then when Questing for Glory took over for the charity event for a couple of years, and then after that, I moved on to the Limit Break staff. It's like the charity focus starts to come in, and the Questing for Glory helped me look at, okay, instead of just looking at the games, now I'm going to look at the incentives. I'm going to look at, wait, this person, this game, I know this game, and I know they can do a lot of good stuff with this, even if we have to work with them, So I think before coming to Limit Break, it was being able to just get the whole wide range of everything, from being able to be focused on one way to, okay, now I'm focused. Now I have a different focus with the charity mindset.
That's awesome to hear. I want to ask you a little bit about, for you personally, coming on to this game screen. Obviously, there's a number of different people here that kind of put the whole schedule together. Tons and tons of discussion. For you personally, what is maybe your number one goal going into picking games out? What are you looking for? What did you want this schedule to look like, I guess?
I mean, if I'm talking with the RPG Limit Break staff, the first goal is how much money can we raise for Nami?
Right.
That's simply what it is. And then from there, we just try to find things that are just all encompassing, everything from as being part of the team. It's the same thought process for me as I kind of talked about the stuff I like looking for, but it's the whole, we just got to find a bit of everything that works. The things that we know will raise a ton of money, the things that we know that will be just entertaining as heck, but won't have a lot of incentives or things with them.
Sure.
Because we know the first run of the marathon is Crisis Core. I mean, very entertaining. It's a classic and everything, but it only has one really big incentive, and it's not until the end of the run. So it's a great way to work into the marathon, but we know it has a little bit of everything that we're looking for.
Yeah, and that kind of actually ties into a question that I kind of want to ask. So, although we are RPG Limit Break, there's a lot of what a buddy of mine has kind of used. He was mostly into horror games, and so he would often use the term horror adjacent. So that's kind of led me to use the term RPG adjacent. We have quite a few games that get submitted in several events that maybe don't necessarily meet the traditional definition of RPG, maybe not as heavily focused on level ups or that kind of progression, but are the kinds of the goal is stated to be, do games that RPG fans would enjoy. So you've had stuff like Mega Man Network Transmission, which is mostly a platformer with, the Battle Network universe, and then Custom Robo, which I ran back in 2018, which is kind of like an RPG arena hybrid. Kind of my question to you is what do you think is the weirdest kind of adjacent game that you absolutely loved as a speed run that you wanted in a marathon?
Oh, that's a tough one. Trying to think of one game specifically. I think a good one, being a personal fan of the series and whatnot that we got in this year, is Dragon Quest Builders. You can look at that and be like, it does have a level up system, but it's a very, it's in the first game here. It's only a couple levels. You're not going to see much. It's more based around it's a story, but it's a very loose story. So it looks adorable, and it's a lot of good nostalgia. It's one of those games that hits the nostalgia for a series, because it has a throwback to an entire game from the first. It's an entire throwback to the first game. So I think if I had to pick one example, would be something like Dragon Quest Builders.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I imagine that's like some of the difficulty because, you know, if you've got any sort of like, you know, a speedrunning marathon that's maybe a little broader in scope, it's not necessarily confined to just like kind of the RPG genre. It's easier to feel like, oh, we're going to bring in people with all sorts of different tastes. Like, you know, at any given person, probably less than 10% of the schedule is going to appeal to you. So the struggles as the games committee finding within that, okay, we're doing a week's worth of RPGs, but how do we still have different audiences that we can play to who have different tastes and like, oh, I'm a big turn-based guy, or I like, you know, more action RPGs, or like you say, we've got practically a Minecraft game in this marathon. I think it's really cool that despite the fact that we have 3 of the Dragon Quest, Dragon Warrior variety games in here, they all kind of play on different styles within that. So really cool variety, I think, that you all have throughout this. My last question that I've got for you, High Spirits, is just simply, again, GK, myself, Ghoul, a couple of us, we've done these prediction shows for years. And we probably put in a small percentage of the work that you all actually have to do as games committee members. I don't know exactly how you want to answer this. How hard is it to have to look through all these submissions and make these kinds of decisions?
I can answer personally for me. It's as easy as can be. I created a marathon for the whole sole sake of putting RPGs out there for people. So like if it wasn't something that I loved doing, I would have never created an entire marathon, you know, and then kept it going for as long as it's, you know, going on 7 years now or whatever.
Right.
So for me, it's easy. It's, you know, I
That's
love
awesome.
games. I love RPGs, and that's what I do that's my channel. That's my life. So it's easy for me.
I'm glad you're on the games committee. That's what I want to hear from everyone. No, dude, I have fun. This is great. You know.
Yeah, because I've learned, you know, we talked even off camera, like games that we, you know, that we saw in submissions and stuff that we as committee members instantly added to our wish lists because it's like, you know, these games look great. I didn't know this existed.
These are not short games. These are RPGs. These are probably many hours, despite the fact that they're going to speedrun them in a couple hours here in a couple.
Yeah,
minutes.
exactly. So
Yeah, I'm
it's,
gonna play it right now.
it's a good discovery because it helps me find games too. So
That's great.
And kind of the nice thing too is it's like we are hoping to still do these events, you know, year to year. So it's like if a game doesn't get in this year, like that doesn't mean you haven't taken notice. You'll have these games that you're interested in, maybe get in, you know, later time. Like one game that's on the schedule here is Atelier Ryza 3, which is I believe the very first game in like any of Gust's games that has gotten into the event. And I've been talking to Ghoul since like we've been friends since like 2016. He has wanted a game, like one of their games, like any of their games in the event. So it's like, you know, just keep trying and you will see some of those games get in eventually. Like
yeah, we thought the Atelier games were very strong submissions this year, and we actually were you know, we had to come up to a decision because there was several that we were considering putting in. So. But yeah, I think this was just a good, strong year for it, especially with the new game coming out. So,
yeah, and especially, admittedly, kind of one of the nice things is, I guess, the silver lining is there's kind of been, you know, a bit of a reset because, you know, there was the long gap between marathons, you know, stuff that was from back in like 2015, 2016. That maybe by 2020, it's like it'd be a little soon to do this again if it hasn't really changed a whole ton. But like it's been, you know, a lot longer. We have stuff like Chrono Cross. We have stuff like Eternal Sonata. We have Lufia 2 coming back for the as, you know, any percent and not the Ancient Cave, which Ancient Cave is great. But, you know, that was like they're almost 2 completely different games. That, you know, it hasn't been in so long. You know, Dragon Quest Monsters 2 hasn't been in since 2017, so it's just really cool to see these things, and then also kind of see how the games have progressed too, because a lot of these games have, you know, gotten a lot faster. People put in the work to get these faster, and we'll get to probably some more individual examples when we get to the schedule. But I think that will just about wrap it up for our introduction portion. If you have any additional questions you would like to ask High Spirits about games committee stuff, we will be doing an intermission in roughly an hour, where we will be having several other staff members who can talk to you about stuff like the volunteer schedule, volunteer signups, hotel and registration for those of you who are looking to attend the event. And yeah, a whole bunch of other stuff. So
Oh,
stick
yeah.
around. Definitely stick around for that. If you're interested in kind of, if you're interested in probing High Spirits a little bit more, as well as, interested in attending the event, if you have any questions regarding, that kind of stuff. Because a lot of people, when they go to their first limit break, they're not really entirely sure what they want to do. I know I've seen a lot of you who have submitted to go to the event here in chat. So we are paying attention to that.
Oh yeah, it's your first time going. It's you're like, what am I gonna do? And then you go there and you go into like the practice room, and suddenly, swarm of people surrounds you, and you're just one of us.
Mm-hmm.
One of us.
It's beautiful. I love going. One of my favorite aspects of just going to a speedrun marathon at all is just, it feels like it's a convention for people like us who just like old retro games. And like it, obviously it includes newer games kind of in that same sort of style, but just a bunch of people nerding out about like, I like going really fast in games. And in this case, in RPGs. If you had gone to a limit break like 4 years ago, it would have just been like, 4 people practicing and 25 people playing Link to the Past randomizer. But we promise it's mostly people playing their speed games, playing their RPGs right now. Nothing wrong with Ult.
Don't forget Free Enterprise. That was a
Free Enterprise. I imagine that's the new thing in the practice room.
Gosh, 2017 when the randos took over.
The day the randos took over,
and they're still taking over here. We're going to see a few randos in this schedule that we're about to break down. But once again, High Spirits, thank you so much for joining us again. High Spirits will be coming back here in the intermission. But for now, let's go ahead and transition over and start working through this week-long absolute banger of a schedule here for RPG Limit Break 2023. Yeah, thank you for coming on.
Alrighty, so we have, I believe, 49 unique runs for this event.
Right.
Because although we run for about 150 or so hours, RPGs tend to be quite long. So we can kind of get into some of these here. Whoops, I scrolled like 2 slides. But yeah, so we're starting off Sunday, July 16th. And as we alluded to, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. So this game has quite an extensive history with speedrunning, but it used to have to be done on the PSP. It was really hard to capture, and the run was like 6 hours because you couldn't skip cutscenes. So we've actually seen a remake within the last year, Crisis Core Reunion, where they like completely redid a whole bunch of systems of the game and allowed cutscene skip. So what used to be like a 6 hour run has turned into like a run you can complete in under an hour and 10 minutes. And under an hour 20, like there is like load removers and stuff. Yeah. So there's quite a lot to this game. I'll go ahead and pull up a clip here from Freedom Pulse's stream. Recording here. Tried to get this cropped in advance, but OBS is kind of jank.
Free software. We're glad to have it.
Yes.
But it also is free software.
Yes. But yeah, so I'll go ahead and pull this up. This is actually one of the fairly early on fights of the run that Pulse actually specifically said to me was one of the cooler ones. But yeah, this game moves a lot quicker. You can see cutscene skip quite active in the run. There's a lot more dynamic combat system. A whole bunch of interesting stuff going on in this game. But the weird thing about the Final Fantasy, I think, extended universe is that, like, there's several games in there with several different pieces of media with varying quality. I know, like, a lot of people played Dirge of Cerberus and they saw Advent Children and they're like, it exists. But like, people liked Crisis Core, so I'm excited to see this get into the event.
Yeah, definitely one of the most beloved PSP games, felt like, of all time. And just, I would say Final Fantasy X fans are crying right now that this one got a cutscene skip added in. Thank you, Square, for finally realizing we should just put cutscene skips in all our games. But the Final Fantasy X community took it into their own hands and just made a cutscene skip mod for it. So it all works out. We all got there eventually. But yeah, absolutely gorgeous looking game. And I think this is one of the most exciting openers that RPG Limit Break has ever had. This is one of the biggest RPG releases of the last 12 to 18 months of RPGs. Obviously, Final Fantasy VII is, right in the middle of kind of, the remake series that is coming out for it right now. So I think this was an absolutely gorgeous take and a way to kick off the marathon. As High Spirits was alluding to, it's one that also doesn't have a ton of incentives to it, but there is a super boss incentive, I believe, for fighting Minerva right here, that you'll be able to donate to. And we're not going to allude to every single incentive throughout the marathon, but just a couple of the noteworthy ones that we can throw out there, just immediately getting hyped about the fact that once again, we are this year supporting NAMI. Your donations will all go 100% towards that, and you can be incentivized to do that through the various incentives, like fighting some of these super bosses like Minerva in Crisis Core. But yeah, I think absolutely brilliant way to kick off the schedule. Very strong Saturday right there. Mm-hmm. After and that, going into Soul Blazer.
Yeah, so to briefly answer a question in chat, is this going to be an in-person run or online? Both. Mostly in person. I believe of our total runs, there are going to be 8 remote, and we'll get into some of those when we get to it. But yeah, we're going to be doing a lot of this stuff in person, live at Salt Lake City, at our venue there. And yeah, we'll talk more about that once we get to the intermission portion. But yeah, continuing off onto Soul Blazer. Blazer is kind of a storied game with RPG Limit Break. We've had it in 3 marathons so far, I believe. Back in 2016, it was also the second run of the marathon. And,
I thought that was cute.
Like, just as a game, it's a fairly storied speed run. Obviously, good luck and or blame Everhate. So it's been interesting to see this one, develop over the years. I actually played the game in recent times. I actually think this is a tremendous game that has aged better than like a game of its kind of simple design realistically should. When this was in 2016, it set an incredibly high bar for performances of this game, and then it was also raced in 2018, and the performance there was excellent. So I'm looking forward to seeing that get continued with this event.
Yep. First time in 5 years that will be showcased. And a general thing you can kind of look at here with Saturday, a lot of longer runs, like High Spirits is talking about, a lot of runs exceeding 4 hours they're going to be in this marathon. Saturday, keeping it relatively quick, an hour and a half for Crisis Core, hour 45 for Soul Blazer. And then we're going even faster and even shorter run in Half Minute Hero 2 by Dull Wolf. And this is one of those I would tell people, if you because I can understand you might not always be invested in a speed run of, especially an RPG that you've maybe never seen before. You don't have to know a lot going into Half Minute Hero 2. This is very aesthetically pleasing. The game is just going absolutely bonkers, off the wall, super, super fast paced the entire time. These are always, I think, an easy inclusion in the marathon.
Yeah, there's really not much else like them in terms of their pace, in terms of their gameplay. Calling them RPGs is almost weird because they feel like puzzle games that have a lot of RPG elements to them, but there's so much about them for RPG fans to love. Half Minute Hero 2 has quite possibly the most stacked lineup of composers ever. It's like a who's who of just some of the greatest composers in JRPG history works on the composition for this game. I also know Dull Wolf has put in a bit of work to get this game faster than the last time it was in at a main event, which was 2016, and the estimates come down since then. I actually see Dull Wolf popping up in chat here, and all I'm going to ask for you as a fellow member of staff, please make sure you get some water and sufficient oxygen while performing this run. I have seen how much you talk during 20-ish minute runs. I am always scared for your well-being during 80-minute runs.
No promises whatsoever. Yeah, Joe Wolf also always puts on an amazing show with all of his runs at different speedrunning marathons. Shouts to Snolf. That's all I'm going to say. Y'all can figure that out later.
Yes. And then the next game we have on here, Dragon Warrior Monsters 2, a Game Boy game in the Dragon Warrior / Dragon Quest franchise. One of the first games that lets you it builds actually off of Dragon Quest V, which we'll get to. That's later in the marathon. Spoilers. Where you can recruit and raise monsters, and it has this whole intricate system. You actually use a lot of the mechanics in this game that kind of separate it from Pokemon, because when it came out, it was one of those games a lot of people thought like, oh, this is a lot like Pokemon, and it's like, no, Dragon Quest was one of the progenitors of the monster collecting genre, and then had a much more dedicated game when you got to Dragon Warrior Monsters 2. I love this game. It's very nostalgic. I had so much fun playing this game as a kid. And I really like some of the stuff that's been put in the route. It's got quite an interesting speedrun route. So I'm happy to see this one get back in. I was on the couch for this in 2017. I know it's seen a few developments since then.
Yeah, I love the fact that the committee has found a way, because obviously the Dragon Warrior, Dragon Quest series, massive over in Japan. Still, it's become bigger over the decades in the West, but it's cool to see more and more games and game series that are big in Japan, as well as we'll be alluding to later on in this schedule, some Japanese runner representation. Again, here with Dragon Warrior Monsters 2, like GK was saying, this one it's almost the Pokemon of the series. And even though we got 3 different Dragon Warrior games, they all have very, very different feels to them as you go through. Coming up next, I think one of the goofier submissions that got into the marathon, goofy maybe a light word to use for, Costume Quest, actually. We've seen Costume Quest 2 show up by our good friend Studio years and years ago, first time showcasing the first game of the series here. And, the first thing I look at here is that Vani is just another excellent commentator. Spoilers, if they're running a game in this marathon, they're probably a very good commentator. Vani is absolutely one of them at the top. Has a lot of good energy to him, can explain the whole run very, very well. And there's a lot going on in this, despite on the surface, it looks like just a super adorable aesthetic. A lot of just, the little sprites going around, trick-or-treating and whatnot. But once you get into it, there is a very visual, appealing just combat system. It's turn-based, but there's also clearly some timing-based stuff to it, a la maybe some more of the Mario RPG style games. And it kind of lends itself to a very fun style with all kind of, it almost comes off a little comic booky to me once you get actually into the combat.
So the most famous name attached to this game is obviously Tim Schafer, of Brutal Legend and Psychonauts fame. Also of Psychonauts fame, low-key, the composer for this game, Peter McConnell. I was trying to make sure I got his name correct. Peter McConnell, fantastic composer in every game he does. Very famous for Psychonauts, very famous for the Sly Cooper series following the first game. Getting into combat here in this clip that I have for you, it has that kind of system similar to Paper Mario, where you're supposed to time button presses, but it's just a really charming looking video game. And as alluded to, Costume Quest 2 got into the very first limit break all the way back in 2015. So this would be the first showing of the first game of this series.
Yeah, I absolutely love the visuals of this. It's just, there's a lot going on screen right now, and it's just, this is going to sound weird for a speedrunning marathon, but I always say it moves just slow enough to where you can appreciate the weight of every single action going on. And it's nice when you got some of these, the modern Final Fantasies like Crisis Core and Remake, where there's a million numbers on screen. There's all sorts of optimization going on. But it's really nice when something moves a little bit slower for me to appreciate every single piece of the routing process that goes into making this go so fast. So yeah, Vani gonna absolutely kill it on this, once again, stacked Saturday that we're going through. Into our final run, really, of Saturday, capping it off with Parasite Eve.
Yes. Parasite Eve was actually one of the games that got into 2020 and was not re-offered in 2022. So we're, getting to see this again for the first time since my pal Turbo Dog ran it in 2016. Again, another storied game as far as speedruns go. Over the years, I think I've seen a lot more people have come out and talked about just how unique and interesting the Parasite Eve games, well, minus Third Birthday, really are. So
Wait, I'm
again,
sorry, go ahead.
yeah. So again, very famous composer Yoko Shimomura worked on this one. You find her a lot in this marathon. I've noticed over the years, and it's kind of great because I love Yoko Shimomura's music. But it's such a unique game. There's not a lot of Plexel posting in chat, the powerhouse of the cell. Yeah, the term mitochondria comes up a lot in this game. But yeah, so this was one of the first real attempts at a survival horror type RPG. There were extremely few games that have really combined those two genres. Ends up having combat system and how it rates the two of them together. Square in the 90s was just avant-garde in general. You had games like Treasure of the Rudras, you had Live Alive. Now you had in the later 90s you had Parasite Eve, which is kind of like a action RPG meets Resident Evil. So yeah, just
I don't know.
Cool lineup.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just my mid-30s speaking, but it was Square in the 90s almost couldn't do any wrong. Everything they touched turned to gold. And like you said, trying here with the horror genre, that's really cool that the Games Committee can have this sort of representation. A completely different feel, like you say, GK, from anything else you're going to see in this marathon. I, in general, think with this Saturday, I thought they did a really good job of finding almost 7 different types of styles to appeal to anybody for whatever aesthetic or pacing or any sort of RPG you would want here on the first day. So that being said, let's now go into Monday, really late Sunday night, as we have one of our first longer runs of the marathon. We've got Blue Dragon by the one, the only Palmer.
Oh man. So for these clips, you will notice I don't have audio playing for them. Given how we set this up, just kind of took them from people's streams, and people don't always have the best verbiage on stream, and might say a naughty word here and there. So we have them on mute, but I'm kind of sad that that ended up being the best way to do it, because the boss theme of this game is a colossal meme. Back in 2018, there was a game on the channel called Barkley Shut Up and Jam Gaiden. The boss theme of Blue Dragon was ripped for that game, and it is it is something. But Blue Dragon is it's such a fascinating video game. It was written, and presentation aspects were handled by Hironobu Sakaguchi of Final Fantasy fame. The artist is Akira Toriyama of Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Warrior, and Chrono Trigger fame. So it looks kind of like a Dragon Quest game and sounds kind of like a Final Fantasy. So there's that weird kind of aspect to it. It was a 360 game because they really were trying to get into that market. And although it didn't break the Xbox 360 out into Japan too much, it did end up being a fairly successful game. I actually have a clip for this one. I'll go ahead and just pull that up while I'm talking here. But it's such a just fascinating video game. Let me go ahead and...
Hey, it's almost like the mini, we alluded to Chrono Trigger right there. It's almost like the mini Dream Team came back again to try to make an Xbox 360 exclusive. They did everything they can to get Japan to care about the 360.
Yeah, they got an absolute who's who of just the Japanese RPG, famous names. And it ends up being I know people's reception of this game over the years has been kind of well, it was a pretty decent video game. There is some really cool stuff to the speedrun, a lot of, overworld tech. Combat actually uses a lot of the game's spell system, as you see here, which basically the way it works is your characters, they charge up a meter, and the further down the meter it goes, the more it does, the more potent the spell is. But the later it goes in the turn order. So there's a lot of these routing decisions you have to make in a lot of these fights. Also, the characters summon these dragons, which basically are kind of like JoJo stands. So if we're referencing 80s anime with Akira Toriyama, I kind of have to get that in there too. And we haven't even talked about the man himself. Palmer is legitimately one of the most interesting people I know. He is absolutely elite at commentary. He he brings such a like cool energy that like I think fits to the overnight slot pretty well. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. Like he is just an easy person to listen to commentate speedruns. And yeah, so this game, like you can actually see how quickly he's inputting his actions on this run. So it is still a fairly skill expressive game, lots of cool menuing, and animations in this game look fairly good. And I actually think that the visual style they took is aged fairly well for like a 2006 Xbox 360 game. Yeah. So go ahead and just jump back here real quick. Oops.
Yeah, the Palmer is such an easy recommend to people on just, you also just go follow his stream in general. He's just a very entertaining individual and has really good taste in the longer RPGs. I think this is a great way to try to cap off night one.
No, he doesn't. This is the exception.
Oh, is this his one?
This Parasite Eve and Ni no Kuni are the exception.
I guess, yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. I was like, I hear banger, 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 Blue Dragon, Parasite Eve, and Ni no Kuni. What are all the things that make it an exception? Actually, don't answer that. Let's not answer that on this show right now.
Brought up. Okay, I'm just gonna say one thing. Somebody brought up that a remake to the Demon Rush exists, and if you know about the Demon Rush, you've been in this channel for a very long time. Somebody mentioned that to Palmer, and he was like, "Yo, this game looks sick. Has anyone run it?" And I immediately just went, "No, please no."
All right. Well, maybe then we should jump into our next run right here. The next morning after is Monday. We're well into Monday morning. And I don't know if I would say like a palate cleanser or what, but obviously a completely different feel here. Going 5 hours almost shorter on the estimate. We got Alcahest and a SNES kind of action RPG we've got right here.
Yeah, so RPG Limit Break does squeak a handful of these in. This was actually a Japan-only game. It is an action game that actually is surprisingly easy to follow. Like I looked at it with Ghoul when we were going over the submissions, and I thought this game actually looks pretty sick. Like I was surprised that I'd never heard of it, and then I saw it was Japan only, and I was like, oh, that makes sense. But yeah, Spiriax making his first showing at Limit Break since Limit Break 2017, back when he ran Alundra. Just a cool looking action game as a speed run. Not a whole ton to really say about it. But yeah, there's like you said, a palate cleanser is really nice. There's so many just like SNES and Genesis era like action games. Like you have stuff like Beyond Oasis and Crusader Ascenti that like they kind of flew under the radar in the era of A Link to the Past. But
sure,
and like Soul Blazer and Illusion of Gaia, but still really cool looking games to see speedruns of.
And that will be our first of the remote runs showcased here in the marathon. Again, I think it's really cool that RPG Limit Break has decided to go the hybrid route, having it mostly on site, but allowing options for people who they can't make the trip. They trip out to these events all the time.
Yeah.
Especially for like a week-long thing.
Yeah, Spirax himself is from Sweden, and that's kind of one of the nice benefits to this sort of thing is like it is admittedly expensive to travel to the United States for to perform a marathon. The next runner we'll be talking about actually will be coming on site, and he's coming from France. But yeah, it's cool to have that option there.
Yeah, you talk about right there. Let's jump right into it. We're completing the Golden Sun trilogy. Golden Sun Dark Dawn, going to be run by Le Grand Grand right afterwards throughout the kind of the middle portion of Monday.
Yeah, so I have a very brief clip to demonstrate with this game. So we're not going to do as deep a dive into this one as we have as we plan to do with some other games, but so here's kind of the story with this game. We've had it at RPG Limit. We've had Golden Sun 1 and 2 at RPG Limit Break. In fact, Golden Sun: The Lost Age getting into Limit Break 2017 was kind of one of the marathons like breakthroughs, or the series' like breakthrough. And when we had Lost Age, and then last year we had Plexa, kind of the goat of Golden Sun speedrunning, running the original game, Golden Sun. I believe it has a subtitle in Japanese. Any % no save and quick. Dark Dawn is kind of the dark horse of the series. Kind of as I know it's a pun, but it's kind of the dark horse of that. It's kind of the dark horse of that series, but And it took a while to develop really as a speed run, but as a whole bunch of developments came into being in 2020 as they rerouted any % no save and quit for Golden Sun 1 and 2, Dark Dawn, like I believe it was Valissa was her name, found like kind of the first tech that really started breaking this game. So I'm going to pull up a clip here for you of just some of the stuff you can do in the game. Keep in mind, this is like right about when you first get into the overworld. Yeah, so you just clip out of bounds using the touchscreen. You get off of this bridge, just walking on this. You're clearly not supposed to be doing any of this. So, this game is kind of infamous for the lack of for the sheer volume of points of no return. You can just circumvent most of those with the glitches in this game. So this is just a very quick teaser of just like some of the jank that you can do in this game.
I love clips like that in speedrunning where, like, I don't know how easy or difficult that is, but it looks so nonchalant, right? Just
Yeah,
like it
that's-
just kind of fell off the bridge right there. There's no like, oh, there was like a lineup and a Legend of Zelda style setup and everything. I got to move 2 to the left. It just kind of fell off the bridge. And all right, time to break the game open. And like you say, you're in like the tutorial at that point. And they're already
You're
breaking
just
the game.
barely getting out of the like tutorial area, which has an out of bounds, by the way, in the tutorial area as well. I just didn't show that because like the first time I saw this on the overworld, I was like, wait, so the points of no returns are just suggestions now. That is amazing. I love this.
Somehow, I'm saying sometimes speedrunning can make games better. Sometimes like games that are like either lukewarm or even bad. I'm telling you, Sonic 06 is a banger speedrun, but we're not going to talk about that game casually. Y'all have already done it. Jumping in, we have got, speaking of, I don't know what the theming was there.
I did want to finish one
go
last
ahead.
thing with Dark Dawn was like this run used to be 7 hours. It's about 4 now. So
Yeah.
like that just shows you how much time you save with that. But we are getting into our next game. Speaking of broken,
That's what I was going to go for. Yep. Brain Lord here by the one, the only PJ. We can stop there. That should sell you.
yeah, PJ is just interesting. He finds these like he's obviously not the only person who played these games, but a lot of the games that he plays, he ends up being just like one of the only people I think who develops a true appreciation for this. Like you look at Mohawk and Headphone Jack, a game he ran at AGDQ 2018, and he was like, he might be the only person who has like had nice things to say about that game. And he clearly loves just about most of the games that he does. And even if he doesn't, he has some cool things to say or show with the run. So so this is actually kind of similar to Alcahest in that like SNES action RPG type vibe. But yeah, it is a PJ game through and through. So the fact that I see all dungeons no retire skip makes me just think, how broken must this game be? And
He's
yes,
having
he
to put
is-
on the weighted training clothes, having to restrict himself a little bit.
Yeah, he is a fantastic marathon performer. Like he was a GDQ staple for many years. He's been at 2 RPG limit breaks, I believe, as well. So
Yeah, it was really cool that he wanted to come out to this event and make an offer for it. Going to be doing this run on site. And Ken, again, we're going a longer run into a shorter run, then going back into a little bit of a chunkier run, although relatively short for 3D Final Fantasies. We've got one of the big enchiladas, I think, of the marathon, Final Fantasy 13. And what's so interesting about this game to unpackage is that obviously when the game first came out, I think things have kind of cooled off on it a little bit. But when the game first came out, obviously a nice word to describe would be it's divisive within the community. Some people love this game, at least think it's solid. Other people thinking it's like, oh, it's out here ruining the franchise and whatnot. It's a hallway simulator. But I tell you what, man, as far as speedruns in the Final Fantasy series go, FF13 might be second to none. This game is wall to wall, amazing commentary. You will need to describe every single step of the way, everything going on inside this incredibly flashy combat system. And you're getting it here with the number 2 runner in the world. I'm just going to 0:13:37, who's only 21 seconds behind the world record in a very, very competitive speed run.
yeah, so kind of one of the things that I've noted about this game as a speed run, a lot of people say casually with this game, like there's a lot of like there's a lot of things you can do in the combat system of the game that might not necessarily be like stuff you really have to do. Like a lot of people say you can just mash A. But kind of one of the things that I really appreciate about speed games is it allows you to really tap into that untapped potential, because a lot of times you're running at these games, you know, at a far lower level than like you're originally playing them at casually. You're having to make use of mechanics like very purposefully, because you want to try and make things go fast as possible. And you really just bring like the best out of games in the speedrunning setting. And I think 13 actually does quite a bit of that. I know a lot of people who run this game, you know, say that it has a really interesting like skill ceiling. It's also a game that I think has just kind of been vindicated over time. Like Final Fantasy games since probably 10 have been polarizing, but they tend to have their fans. And like after the years, once like kind of, you know, some of the controversy dies down, there's always like people who come out and say like, that was a dope game. I know Ghoul is definitely like that. He really likes this game. I think this was his first completed Final Fantasy.
Really? That's a plot line in one of my friends' gaming history I did not know. What a weird first Final Fantasy is 13 for you.
Yeah, it was like he's played a lot of them, but he beat 13 first, and then Stranger of Paradise, which he ran last year. that is a hard as butt game to run like that. And then finally 6 recently. But yeah, 13 is just a fantastic speed game. In ways that like people, if you're not super into the game casually, you might still find some really interesting things. So this page actually ends up being kind of long. So to segue into the next game, I do have one more like short clip that I want to show. So Mario and Luigi Paper Jam.
What a game! What a clip coming up.
The story to tell with this game is there's a couple of people in the Mario speedrunning glitch finding scene. I believe it was Really Tall and Solidified Gaming worked on this one quite as heavily, not quite as heavily as they did with games like Thousand Year Door, which is infamously broken, and the Paper Band Partners in Time, which they came to break afterwards. But they have been involved with that game. Paper Jam was found to be like super broken pretty early on. There were several things that were found to be broken with Dream Team, which was featured at last year's Limit Break. This kind of is just Dream Team, but like supercharged. I'm going to pull up a clip here real quick. Unfortunately, because this is an MP4, and like most of my clips are in MKV format, this one is MP4, so I might have to do a very brief crop here. I'm going to go ahead and just pull this up. So this is the tutorial section of the game, which they're infamous for being kind of exceedingly long in these games. Yeah, you just get out of bounds, like, in the tutorial section of the game. And, yeah, you just ignore most of this game. Yeah, so that's just the start of the run. Yeah.
Dude, anytime you can find, every speedrun deserves to find a tutorial skip at some point. Once again, the visual of it was so good. It was just like the Golden Sun one. But this one, they just go off screen, just whoop, just a little 1 inch around it, and that's enough to completely break.
There's almost this entire game is just out of bounds and just skipping things you don't want to do. Like the record is, I think, 51 minutes, which if you played this game casually, I mean, it's not Dream Team length, but it's like a good solid 20-25 hours. Unless you're speedrunning it. So that gets so that is a run that Tonkatsu will be doing. Another one of our remote runs. Yeah, Tonkatsu is just a brilliant runner, like fantastic at Donkey Kong. He's come in to run like basically all of the Mario and Luigi games, and he's put up very competitive times in all of them. So I'm excited to see that as somebody who has, you know, I mean, I'm an admin of the Mario and Luigi Discord, so I'm always invested in these games. He came in and he's really like kind of revitalized the scene a little bit.
Yeah, I'm a
it's just
big fan of
fantastic performer.
Tonkatsu. Super happy that he's getting to get showcased here at RPG Lindbergh. Another one of our remote runs right there. And then to cap off our Monday evening, we have got the first of a couple. We were talking about it earlier. Randomizers have become massive in the speedrunning community. I don't even know if you could say they're speedrunning adjacent anymore. They're just, hey, this is a different way to play the game. It's going to be different every single time we play it, but we are still trying to go as fast as we can every single time. And it is going to be the RPG chick as she takes on Final Fantasy Mystic Quest Randomizer. So many games in the Final Fantasy series have these, I almost describe them more like build-based randomizers, where it's less about like, you know, finding a bomb bag or a hook shot like you would in like a Zelda game. And it's really just about like, all right, these are the tools I was given to be able to just survive through this game. What is the best way to put all the pieces of this janky puzzle together to allow myself to get to the end? Definitely looking forward to Final Fantasy Mystic Quest Rando to cap off our Monday night.
Yeah, so kind of a couple things. One thing to touch on is something that's kind of nice about doing these events year to year is kind of seeing the variance of people. RPG Chick, I believe, has been to a few different limit breaks. She's fairly well known within the community. I'm happy to see her get her first run. I don't recognize Hebbings, but he's also been posting in the server and definitely seemed very excited to do this run. And I'm always happy to see, you know, new faces at these events. And Mystic Quest is like a 2-ish hour casual game, so I'm really interested to see how the heck you beat this game in like under an hour and a half.
Yeah, super interesting to see like what the randomizer communities have been able to sort of like take games and then completely restructure them to make them this fun, unique experience every time you see it. So yeah, I'm interested to see like what corners and whatnot they were able to cut.
Exactly, yeah.
So with that, let's jump into one more day we've got here before our intermission. We have got Tuesday, kicking it off with a bunch of Western RPG love, GK.
Yep. So I just to briefly mention, so Bard's Tale technically starts on Monday, but I felt like the way to logically segment these would be to put this here, because we actually have like a block of older Western RPGs back to back to back. Starting off with Bard's Tale, which is the oldest of these three, not the oldest game in the marathon, but I know Oregon Mike, they run a lot of these kind of traditional like PC RPGs that, you know, kind of have been a bit lost to time, but have had like a, you know, they had like a classic, very nostalgic audience and have kind of seen a bit of a resurgence in the era of Steam and good old games, GOG, with, you know, various different ways to play them. So this will be interesting to see. I know there's like definitely a crowd of people who grew up on these old like DOS and Macintosh and you know, very old computer games. That's just, you know, excited to see these. AD&D, this kind of, I believe there's like a box of these, like 3 or 4 of these games, and we've had a couple of the other ones in the series. I'm blanking. It's like the Cursed Pool or something. I'm like blanking on the name of the game. But we've had a few of these in recent events by like the likes of MS Kane and David TKI. He's a I apologize. I forgot to oops, hold on. I left Legrand's name in that box. I copied from the previous slide. David TK will also be doing Quest for Glory. Yeah, Pool of Radiance. Thank you. I'm glad somebody in chat corrected me there. Forgive me on the sheet here, but yeah, David TK getting a miniature Western block here of RPGs, and capped off by Quest for Glory 2, Trial by Fire.
Yeah, which will be having a bid war involved with that as well. Again, talking about a couple of the incentives throughout the marathon, where you'll be able to choose which class. And I know that's always got to be a lot that a runner has to potentially be prepared for. Doing only 1/3 of what you're practicing for a run will be doing either fighter, magic user, or thief. But David, one of those consummate professional marathon runners, has run a bunch of different games at a bunch of different marathons. Going to be taking on, like you say, Advanced D&D and Quest for Glory 2 back to back, and one of those being a bid war. Which one he'll even do, who knows?
And it's kind of nice for Quest for Glory as well, because historically we've done like an anthology of all the different games. We've done that, I believe, twice now with Mr. P.R. Miller, and I think David was like raced Mr. P.R. Miller at one point. But now we're doing like 100%. We're not doing like a 10-minute showing of this game, so a bit more of a fully fleshed out kind of thing. So yeah, we're getting a nice little comfy block of these old school PC RPGs that have a ton of nostalgia for a lot of people. And then we're getting into one of the biggest games of last year, Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Xenoblade has kind of become a Limit Break staple ever since 2017, and has been in I think every event in some capacity, or Xenoblade 1, then 2, then Torna, then X by Legrand last year. This one's going to be by Quadriceps, who's actually coming all the way from Singapore, I believe, to be showing this game off, and possibly Octopath 2 later on in the week. So Xenoblade 3 is, people love this game. It's huge. It's, yeah, I apologize to Moonblaze Wolf in chat, who has to follow up on one of the biggest games of the year. That's like 7 hours, like a 53-minute run of, and admittedly also really cool game. We'll get to there. But Xenoblade 3 is kind of the point in the series where they really ramp a lot of things up. When you play the game casually, you have 7 party members. It's a little bit ridiculous, and the game does a lot to make that penetrable for the player. But one of the, like I mentioned with Final Fantasy 13, is one of the really neat things to see with speedruns is to see how a speedrunner can really push a combat system to its limit. I'll go ahead and pull up a clip here from Quadra's, I believe this is from his world record run. Let me go ahead and just make sure this is cropped here, and we'll go ahead and switch that over. So yeah, just, by the way, one thing I tried to include with a lot of these clips is at least some amount of menuing, because as much as we love to see the really cool boss strats, one of the things that really separates a lot of RPG speedrunners is how quickly they can they know to menu, what inputs they need to put in to get out of menus as quickly as possible and back to the games. It is a somewhat underrated skill in speedrunning, but is one of the purest forms of skill, is just getting this stuff down pat really quickly. And we have another game later on that is quite famous for its menus, and I'm sure you'll be excited to talk about that.
I'm very excited to talk about that. Yes, I am. It's like you say, it really is one of the purest forms of speedrunning, that there's nothing about it that's necessarily a mystery, right? There's a lot of times, we watched those clips earlier, Golden Sun, Mario and Luigi. I don't necessarily know how easy or difficult it is to clip out of bounds, what the setups are to it or anything. They're going to explain it, but I can sit here with no audio and be impressed by this menuing right here. I can just, I'm seeing go up, down, left, right. How much of it is just complete muscle memory at this point? How much are they reacting to potentially? Sometimes your menuing has to work around, I don't have this thing in this RPG because there's RNG in a lot of these games, and knowing both that stuff, both in, outside of combat and inside of combat, I think that's some of the coolest things in speedrunning you can watch.
Yeah, kind of one of the neat things about this game is, unlike previous Xenoblade games, you actually switch between your characters in combat pretty actively. You can one of the big things to the combat system, actually, you can see is these area of effects buffs. So he's shuffling between his characters to get actions off with his characters in the buff circles and get as much out of those as possible while casting his arts. In this game's combat system, you could link together 2 of your characters, and there's a lot of strategy in routing to the game behind how you interlink your characters and when they when they're supposed to do stuff, because you get a lot of benefits from it. As mentioned, this game is very busy.
There's like I said, 7 party members going at once.
And some of these fights, he sticks to one character, but a lot of them he will at least switch between them a few times to try and make things happen as quickly as possible. And I really just like seeing in an RPG when a runner just brings out the most of a game. I will admit I was not the biggest fan of the change to the combat system from previous games, but this is one of those games that I definitely, while I was playing it, thought to myself, man, I would love to see what a speedrunner can do that truly brings out the most from this game. And Quadra is I believe still currently by a fairly good margin the record holder for this game, so I'm excited to see him come to the event. Also chatted with him a few times, and just like kind of just excited to see him at the event in person, like in general. So yeah, Xenoblade 3, very elaborate long chain attacks. So there's a lot of quick decisions you have to make here to optimize these, and you just absolutely eviscerate these bosses. This clip I think is like the longest one I have. But yeah, so he goes into the chain attack here. I'll go ahead and just like skip ahead a little bit. But like he's just absolutely shredding the boss's HP. So, and kind of one of the neat things to it is like you actually try to deliberately overkill a boss so you can get the EXP bonus there. Because like you want to minimize grinding in these games as much as possible.
I'm sure, like at the end of the day, they're happy with all the submissions that they got. I guarantee you, the kind of far and away best runner of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, one of the biggest RPG releases in the last year or two. I guarantee you, the games committee was like, "Oh, I'm so glad we got this submission."
Yeah.
I guarantee you, this was one of the first games they're like, "We're finding a spot for it." So
yeah,
cool
this
to
is
see
like
Xenoblade love.
it sold 2 million copies within a few months. One of the biggest Nintendo franchises of recent years, since the games have been all accessible on Switch, except for X. Please, want to like fingers crossed there. But like showing up at the Game Awards last year, like this was one of the biggest RPG releases in a while, which is nice to see for a game that's doesn't have the Final Fantasy name and legacy attached to it. So it's been cool seeing RPGs kind of see a resurgence in the past few years.
Yeah, and talking about that, like obviously we just had right there a massive AAA RPG that came out, but I know you're about to get into it here with Chained Echoes. Now we're going indie, and an indie darling.
Yeah, surprisingly, a lot of people got into this game, and I say surprisingly because I'm somebody who like loves seeing indie games come out with RPGs. Like another game, Moonblaze Wolf also runs. Bug Fables is one of my favorite games I played in recent years, and kind of just seeing, like I do love the indie RPG scene, but there's not a ton of them coming out because these are hard games to patch. They're hard games to like design for and make appealing, and just like usually if you're like one or two people in a development studio, or even like a small studio of like 5 to 10 people, usually you end up making something like a platformer or a roguelite. Like those are kind of the rage for indie games. If you're making an RPG, you're probably really a big fan of RPGs, and you're making a game for fans of RPGs.
Yeah.
And those actually quite often don't quite take off. They develop like a nucleus of fans, but they're not super popular. But like Chained Echoes, I was seeing people I didn't even know were RPG fans talking about this game. So I'm definitely excited to see this one get in, as evidenced by no credits warp. Like there's stupid broken categories. There's also like a no major glitches. It's like 4 hours for this game. So I'm interested to see the glitches with this game. And I met Moonblaze Wolf at last year's Limit Break. I'm excited to see him get a run in the event itself.
Yeah, I'm gonna be two awesome games there, back to back from last year with Xenoblade into Chained Echoes. Then we hit the second of our trilogy of the Dragon Quest series right here with Dragon Quest Builders. So we went kind of Pokemon style with the first one. Now we're going a little more Minecrafty.
Yeah, there's like an era in like the early 2010s where I think a lot of games were kind of trying out this style, and Dragon Quest Builders was one of those games that came out that a lot of people were like, I'm surprised this works, but it works so well. So we got a bid war here between the different individual chapters. I know the Countess from Dragon Quest, mainly involved with like Dragon Quest 4, but just been involved with that scene in general. So I'm happy to see him get a run into the event itself. So
yeah, that chapter bid war looking like it's between Caitlin, Remolder, and Cole Garanham. So another big 3-way bid war that y'all can throw down for deciding which one is going to get showcased here at the marathon. Those bid wars are definitely going to be big pushed, I'm sure, in the days building up to it. Again, raising money for Nami all throughout the week, as we've been for so many years now. And then we go into, okay, you got to let me try to say this one. My German is beautiful. Xenosaga Episode 1, Der Will Zermacht. Do you say the...
Actually, considering the time I heard you say Roglov med Flud, which I can't even pronounce very well, the time I made you pronounce Danish, that was much better German.
Okay,
you've been getting better.
Let's go.
You've been getting better at it.
Thank you. Every year there's going to be one of these tests on the schedule, like I was saying, to be good. But yeah, we're going actually now. We're doing a lot of more modern RPGs for a while there. Going back to the PS2 era with this one, another Xeno game.
Yep. So kind of with the expansion of like, with the popularity of Xenoblade, just the Xeno series in general, I think has been seeing kind of a bit of a resurgence in like retrospect. Xenogears, I've seen a lot more people talking about that game. Because the games, while they're different series, they have loose connection of themes across all of them, and they've been if you're interested in one, in like Xenoblade, you might be interested in some of these games, even though they're quite different types of gameplay. This one's more of a traditional turn-based RPG, and this one's been offered quite a few times since I think 2017, and never quite got in. We did see Xenosaga 2, which casually is seen as like the worst game, but is like a speedrun has its own really cool tech. Got into 2020 and unfortunately has not been reoffered since. So this is going to be the first showing of Xenosaga at the event. It's definitely a series people know, people recognize. I'm interested to see kind of how you take this game. Ghoul just stopped in chat. Hi, Ghoul.
99 months in a row. What a streak. Let's go.
Yeah.
We're 1 month off next month.
So I'm interested to see how this game goes. I know Ghoul is a fan of the soundtrack of this game, done by the great Yasunori Mitsuda. Not a ton of music in this game, as I understand it, but like the music that's in there is really good.
Dude, can we stop to recognize in an RPG speedrunning marathon, you're going to have time to listen to some of the best soundtracks in gaming history. I just think through all the games, all the bangers, left and right, all over them. It's one of my honest to God favorite moments of an RPG Limit Break is just getting to chill to beautiful music. Yeah. And you know what?
Speaking of Mitsuda.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of beautiful music, still to this day, over 20 years later, one of my favorite soundtracks in all of gaming. We got Chrono Cross here with the Radical Dreamers edition. The first time this will be showcased at an RPG Limit Break since we got to do the co-op run of it years ago that I got to be involved with. That was pretty cool. But now we're getting in a completely different light. I got to tell you, big shout outs to Square for actually patching some of their games. That the Chrono Cross Radical Dreamers edition team came back, patched this game. They made it silky smooth. They removed a lot of the problems it had from when it originally launched. The game is just not nearly as laggy or anything anymore. And it turns out it has made for a resurgence in the Chrono Cross speedrunning community. People are like, wait, we now have a version that's like an hour faster than the PlayStation 1 version. Let's go. And Railkun is going to go even further beyond like Super Saiyan 3 levels of it by also running it with fast forward. Now, anyone who's familiar with just the PS1's version of it, it's the fast forward is something you're not supposed to get until like a new game plus. Now you can do it from the very beginning on a new game. So you get the beauty of starting from the new game, having to route around. You don't have a lot of your tools at your disposal. You're having to build up your characters while also being able to go very, very fast through a lot of like the text cutscenes and whatnot going on throughout the game, to where Railkun is going to be able to go through Chrono Cross in an amazing less than 4.5 hours. Railkun, they are awesome. So I am glad they are finally getting to showcase their skills here in this game. I know we've got at least one clip right here. I believe, we were throwing it out.
Yeah, you linked me to this one where we should post it. I mean, this is kind of one of the coolest fights in the entire run is the Dario fight.
Yep.
But yeah, as you can see, things going quite fast. There actually is quite a scene for like the booster percent and just like fast forwarded kind of runs for games that did later add those. But Cross being one of like the original games to have this sort of feature kind of has an extended history of like speedrunning with it. And speaking of extended history, I know Railkun has been like one of the like progenitors of running this game. They've run it for I'd say probably close to like a decade if I remember correctly.
Yep. Railcoon, I remember, was kind of one of the pioneers of this run. I felt Puexel's in chat as well, feeling like it brings back nostalgia of us being like some of the first runners of like Kingdom Hearts 2. Now it's this like massive community. And that's kind of what happened with Chrono Cross as well. Now all of a sudden you've got tons of people running this game. It's cool to see Railcoon kind of getting their chance in the spotlight to showcase, I think, the most digestible way to have Chrono Cross in any sort of major speedrunning marathon. And like you said, like, you know, not only are you going to be having to do these fights in ways that you were not intended to do whatsoever, but also on this fast forward feature, pretty much as possible. You can see his little fast forward button right there. Wanted to keep that up as much as possible throughout the run to get it down to this 4.5 hour time slot. So
yeah,
this is a game that near and dear to my heart. I'm so glad it got into the marathon, and I'm so excited to see Railcoon, their skill set being put to the test here.
Yeah, I mean, this was just one of my favorite games in general. So as Puexel mentioned, the nice thing is that the fast forward doesn't mess with the music. The fight shown there barely has music, although the music that plays there is kind of one of the most iconic themes from that game. So admittedly, we're hyping up something that I sadly don't have playing in the background, but trust me, the soundtrack.
Trust us. You know what? To satiate y'all's hunger, just come watch the marathon at the time. You will hear hundreds upon hundreds of amazing tracks in all these games all throughout the marathon. It's beautiful stuff. As we got 2 more games here before we hit our intermission, finishing off Tuesday. We got Exile, Wicked Phenomenon. What is this?
Okay, so from what I understand with this game and from what I've seen of it, it's kind of like one of those SNES era, I mean, it's a TurboGrafx game, games where it's like a side-scrolling action RPG, kind of like Ys 3 for those of you who've played that game. Working design's completely messed up with the numbers on the original version, so Final Cut will be running a patched version that adjusts the numbers to, I think, a bit more reasonable, like more what they were intending to go for. A good part of why this game is in here is the cutscenes and the voice acting, which are very mid-90s, very endearing and entertaining. I remember Ghoul and I were looking at this going like, what the heck is this? And Ghoul was like, he found a part that he was just like, okay, this needs to be in the marathon. So I'm happy to see it there. There will be cutscenes you can donate for to show off all of them, like before the run. That is an incentive. Please donate for that.
Yes, anytime there is an incentive to play a cutscene, you know that is secretly going to be some of the funniest stuff you watch all week. If they're making the cutscenes an incentive, please make sure to get those donations in.
Absolutely. The last game we'll talk about here before we send it over to intermission will be Eternal Sonata by Oro. Oro, one of our longtime graphic designs artists who actually helped make the layout here for, like, other than what's in this webcam feed, the webcam feed of the Bonehead next to me and the slideshow here, which even then, the font, Oro picked up the font and kind of the color scheme. Oro's been big in our channel, and our community has also run a few games in the past. Eternal Sonata was actually his debut at Limit Break 2016. Very near and dear game to him, but also, like, I know he's wanted to do a run back for this game for a couple years now. Has improved the route, improved the gameplay. It's just a unique action RPG, similar to Blue Dragon. It's one of those games that they originally put on the 360 to try and appeal to Japanese audiences, but it's got quite an interesting soundtrack. Motoi Sakuraba is pretty, established in there, but like a lot of the music is based on the work of Chopin because the life and times of Chopin is part of roughly what the game is kind of about. And it's just a really unique looking game to see in motion. So I'm interested to see, what all has changed since last time. And I know Oro is excited to get this run in. So, but with that is basically everything from the first half of the marathon, roughly the first 50% of games. We got the first 23 here, I believe. So we'll be doing the last 26-ish here in about half an hour, give or take. But we're going to be sending it over to the to a couple of other members of staff, Heroic Spirit Gamer, Bob the Ninja Goldfish, as well as High Spirits, who was here earlier in the call. We were giving him an interview. Sorry, a whole bunch of like my screens are just going off, and I'm like, what is going on here? I'm like trying to make sure that I'm like keeping everything going. I just need to do it for a little bit longer before we can, take a break here. But yeah, we're going to be sending it over to staff for some Q&A and some, information about the event itself.
Hello and welcome, friends. Hope you're all enjoying the discussion we've had so far. I'm here, Heroic Spirit Gamer, along with my two fellow staff friends.
Hello there.
Hi, everybody. You saw me earlier.
Oh,
They
man.
sure did. Though I don't know if they saw that hat earlier, unless I wasn't paying attention earlier.
What hat? I don't see anything going on around here. Nothing. I don't see anything.
All right, so
I
we're
feel
here
like I'm the only one that didn't bring a prop.
I
I was not aware I was attending a Carrot Top comedy special.
They're not really I mean, I guess you could call them props.
They're friends, okay?
Friends. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we're here to talk to you a little bit about, the event, what we have coming up. So for those who may not be aware, as of last week, we have our schedule announced. We're going over it in this stream right now. But alongside that, more importantly, for the sake of our event, registration opened, hotel booking opened, prize submissions opened, volunteer submissions opened. The whole holy gambit, the holy grail, was launched last week around this time. For all that information, you can find details on our website in various locations, primarily in the nav bar up top, and then also hotel booking will be available after you register. It'll be in your profile page. So all of that is freely available and out there. Bob, if you wanted to say anything more about volunteer forms.
Yeah, so I wanted to go a bit over our volunteer forms. I'm here as my role. This is my first year taking on the official role of volunteer coordinator for RPG Limit Break. So the way that it looks is when you if you go to rpglimitbreak.com/volunteer, a lot of the information you need is broken down for you there. It includes a link to the volunteer sign-up form. It also includes some important information for 2023 volunteers on the remote side of things. The first one being that in an effort to move back to a majoritively on-site event, we are going to be giving preference to those that are on site when it comes to hosting and donation station volunteering. There's the other remote roles, which are social media and moderation, will not be affected by this. Those will try and stay majoritively remote. All of your submissions will for volunteering will go through there, be through the form, be they remote or online. It's all through the same form, remote or on site. Sorry. You have various different roles, which are your stream tech, who are the people who maintain and kind of keep running the PCs that record and stream the event. They also help out the new role that the producer, which we are not opening volunteers for this year, to make sure that transitions between games are smooth. This is a pretty good role to start with if you want to become a volunteer. If you've not volunteered before, it's kind of a good gateway into the tech side of things. You have your stage techs, who are the people who help set up the games, run in between. They are also, at the moment, with our current COVID policies, responsible for wiping down headsets, keyboards, and things like that for not only the runners, but also for like your host, your donation station volunteers, and so on. You have your audio techs. Audio tech is the person that monitors all the audio that goes out to the stream. They work directly under the discretion of the producer. Familiarity with digital audio mixes, however, is required. But we are encouraging people to apply for interview tech if they want to get into audio tech. I'll get onto interview tech in a minute. And if you're also interested in getting into audio tech, volunteering, feel free to ask if you want to shadow one of the current audio techs as well, if you're on site. Interview tech works directly under the SID. Basically, who's in the chat. I should also mention audio techs work under Ashen, who's running the stream right now. Stage techs work under Miria, who's amazing.
Also in the chat.
Also in the chat. And stream techs work under Rizlu, who is unfortunately not with us today, but is also amazing. And I might be a little bit biased. But yeah, interview tech is also a great first volunteer role. It basically helps monitor the sound and set up everything else for the interviews that we do in conjunction with the interview crew. It's a great gateway into the tech side of things. That's kind of the tech department. On the community department side of things, we have hosting, obviously. If you don't know what hosting does at the moment, go back, watch some of our other VODs, and just sort of listen to anyone that's talking on screen, really. I want to hasten to point out, you do not need to be an experienced host to apply. If you are concerned about that, just try. You never know what can happen. Donation station. These are the folks that work in conjunction with the host. They process the donations we receive on behalf of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, the charity we raise money for. But it also includes like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. There's a lot of hats to be worn when you're doing donation station, but do not worry about that. You will get detailed walkthroughs on everything you need to do. It is an absolutely great first community department role to sign up for. Interview. We are not accepting interview volunteers this year. We kind of have our interview team established at the moment. I should mention the hosting team work under Vanny Van, who you heard getting propped up for running Costume Quest earlier. The interview team, donation station team worked under Alex K47. The interview team worked under Ghoul this year. Clear Tonic having retired last year. And if you've done donations for GDQ, you know exactly what you're doing here. You might even need to do less because we don't have a lead donation station role. Most of that is taken care of by staff members. We have the safety team. It's what used to be called the enforcement team, but that kind of sent the wrong message. There's not a whole lot of enforcement to be done, and what enforcement is actually to be done is usually done by staff or senior members of the safety team. It's mainly walking around, making sure people aren't doing silly things, making sure they're wearing their badges, making sure they're wearing their masks properly, that kind of thing. The check-in safety is under Wells, and we all love him. Check-in, working under Dowolf, are, as we said before, the folks that check everyone into the event. They will check IDs, they will check COVID vaccinations, things like that. Make sure everyone gets the right badges and things for their role. Cleaning, also under Dowolf. The cleaning crew are getting worked a little bit harder than normal at the moment because we've got a few extra protocols in place because of the COVID stuff. Usually it's just sort of walking around, making sure there's no large abundance of trash left anywhere. But we are also, at the moment, asking for, cleaning volunteers to do things like help wiping down chairs and tables and things like that have been used. There's moderation. Moderators who apply will ideally be remote, and you will be responsible for moderating both the Twitch chat and the Discord server. We're not separating those anymore. We're doing them one moderation rule. Please note, if you are accepted, this is not a permanent moderation assignment. You may lose your privileges after the marathon concludes. We also have social media volunteers who help us promote the event on Twitter, basically from likes, retweets, stuff like that. Moderation and social media are both remote roles. One of the things I specifically wanted to talk about is roles that don't always necessarily get a whole lot of volunteers, such as cleaning, check-in, safety, social media, moderation. We would really like it if you guys could consider stepping into one of those roles as well as anything else that you're applying for. It really comes down to crunch time. Like last year, we had a grand total of, I think, 4 people volunteer for check-in, and everything else was done by Dowolf, the role coordinator, or volunteers that just showed up at times. Hey, is there anything I could do? So please, if you're applying, go for one of those. The last role I really want to talk about is setup and teardown. These aren't official roles because they happen like once a marathon. But setting up the marathon is super important. And dare I say, taking the marathon apart is even more important. Last year, 75% of teardown was done by 7 people, including loading and unloading a huge U-Haul truck. So please, if you have any ability to, please spend some time with us helping to set the marathon up, and spend some time taking the marathon apart. The last thing I really want to say is thank you to everyone that does volunteer. It is absolutely brilliant. They're the lifeblood of our marathon. I am so honored that people volunteer for us, and that I'm able to kind of be the top of that right now, because marathon's so important to me. Just to give you all a bit of behind the scenes peekery, volunteer forms have been open for what, like 7 days now, I think.
7 days exactly.
Yeah, and we have around 35 volunteers. Please, 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 do not wait to get your forms in.
Please.
We really need to know what sort of thing we're operating with. As we understand if you aren't sure if you're making it on site yet or not, but please, it really does make a difference when we can have a bit of knowledge ahead of time that we may have a decent amount of volunteers. And I will say, if you are coming and you hadn't thought about volunteering, please do. It really is, even if it's just for one shift, for one role, it really is a lot of fun, and gives you a really good feeling at the end of the day, because you've helped contribute to such a good cause. And I've talked for ever at this point, so I'm going to turn over to someone else.
Yeah, the one thing that I want to add on to that is, even if the roles that you want to volunteer for aren't one of the ones we called out as primarily needing more volunteers, like say Stream Tech, for example, even taking positions and learning helps you to grow in the future, so that you can take on more advanced tech roles. And in the immediate, our more advanced tech volunteers can potentially move up more easily. So you can have Stream Techs move up more easily if they're experienced into Stage Tech or other things. So, even the roles where it's sees a lot more activity, 1 or 2 shifts volunteering for the first time can still make a considerable impact. Since we were calling out who was in charge of certain roles, I also want to add in that if you have any kind of questions or concerns or any issues regarding registration or the hotel booking link, you can please contact either website at RPG Limit Break or management RPG Limit Break. That'll get hold of most of the same people regardless. And for prizes, which is available again in the nav link, is a Google form. Doesn't have its own dedicated page, unlike most other things we have. The main contact for that would be Ghoul. So if you have any questions regarding the prize form, you can also feel free to reach out to Ghoul. Yeah, that's about what I had to cover.
BD Jeffy P. Yes, it does include the number. However, volunteers are required to join our Discord. Kind of, as long as you're on there and you have the right name, we should be able to find you.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's a question that I've already been asked a few times. The sad reality is that Discord's changing this at a very inconvenient time for us, and it's being rolled out very slowly. So whether or not people start getting impacted by it before we have to do our role dissemination, who knows? We'll just play it by ear.
Please be aware, if you are applying for remote hosting or remote donation station, you will have to undertake a remote orientation. and that will be on you and the role coordinator to organize if you're selected, of course.
Okay, well, I guess something slightly different than volunteering.
Sure.
As a member of the games committee, if anyone has any questions about like the way, anything that our thoughts on games, on the schedule and things, whatnot, which I will try my best to answer. I will be back at the end of the show, so I can definitely answer questions that anyone has during while the schedule thing is going on, while the schedule discussion is going on. But yeah, easy to volunteer, y'all. It's. I even, I took on check-in for you this year too, Bob. Something new for me to try to help out. So
Appreciate that, friendo.
So it's very easy. It's not intimidating, any of it. It's a lot of it is very easy, and there's always staff around everywhere to answer questions. If not, just being able to shadow the person who's currently doing something like donation tracking or whatever, and being able to easily pick it up.
So I know that we're here for a community Q&A. So if you guys have any questions about volunteering, I'm willing to answer those. If you volunteer on social, go ahead and book a room now or wait for approval. If you are attending, book your room. Do not, don't wait.
Yeah.
Now that being said, I do want to point out that at this time that we have had one day of the event sell out hotel room wise. We are working on that. So, if you are impacted by that, it is the Friday of the marathon is currently sold out for our room block.
We cannot
impacted by that.
We cannot stress enough. Book your room now.
Yeah. Once we have that resolved and have more allocation, we'll be posting about that in social medias, probably Twitter, as well as definitely our Discord, letting everyone know. Please start booking our rooms. Booking early really does help us with these kind of things. We've had to really reduce our expectations for between COVID and also our numbers last year. Really reduce our expectations for our number of attendees, which has also dramatically impacted the number of hotel rooms we've asked for. So if we have issues in that regard, we need to know sooner than later. We can allocate and adjust with the hotel.
BD Jeffy P, again, the hotel is close to the airport. It also has a shuttle that runs from the hotel to the airport. So yeah, please do not wait. Book your hotel rooms. Book your travel. Do not wait on us releasing the volunteer schedule in 6 odd weeks to do that. We've had hotel reservations open for a week, and one of the days is already sold out. So just extrapolate from that what you will.
Yeah, it's also important to know. So, in terms of deadlines, our volunteer form is closing on June 4th.
Yep.
Our registration is closing on June 18th. And 4 days later, June 22nd, is when our hotel booking link expired.
Also,
so that is almost.
Please don't wait to volunteer to register until after volunteers. Please don't do that. If you're applying for an on-site volunteer, you're going to be expected to be there. And like Gamer said, registration closes before the volunteer schedule comes out.
Yes.
And to answer a quick question for RP Praya, is there a channel looking for roommates? If you have registered in the Discord, there is a channel you should be added to called the 2023 Attendee Channel. There is a pinned link of a spreadsheet that you can use to get together with people, or you can just ask in the channel, look for people who are looking for roommates.
Yep, which has been utilized by a few attendees already.
Yep.
Plans, so...
So, are there any questions in the channel from the chat? that I can answer about, or myself or Gamer can answer about any of the volunteer roles specifically.
Something that I just thought of that I've been asked once or twice while we're waiting for questions. When it comes to orientations for our roles, the current game plan, which is not finalized and published anywhere, but the current plan is to have 2 different rounds of orientations for all of our roles through all of tech and all of community roles on the Saturday before the event. Probably more like after lunch, late after lunch, and then much more in the evening. And then before we go live on Sunday morning, we'll be doing another round of them for anyone who has joined us that morning and needs orientation. After that point, it'll be primarily one-on-one orientations if you're coming later in the week.
Yep.
So if you're going to be in that situation, you also need to make arrangements with us, which we'll be aware of when we make the schedule as well.
And you will be required to attend your orientations. Just if you are, say you applied for, I don't know, hosting, even if you are an experienced host and you've hosted for Limit Break and GDQ and all of that before, you will still be expected to attend an orientation. If you do not attend an orientation before your shift, we'll probably give it to somebody else. Another thing I wanted to cover about volunteering is we got a lot of feedback last year that the times for the volunteer shifts ran from 6 to 10, 10 to 2, 2 to 6, etc. And the 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. shift ran right through breakfast, which runs from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. So we've shifted that this year, and it is now everything starts 7 to 11, 11 to 3, etc., etc., etc. So everyone should have at least an hour in the morning to get themselves some breakfast before they start.
Oh, you gotta get that. Gotta get that free breakfast. It's so good.
It is quite the extravagant free breakfast that this hotel provides.
Though, good luck wrestling the waffle iron away from Lisa Rock's.
Yeah. All right. Well.
So we're being told we are running out of time, so I think we're going to have to hand it back to to GK and Spike Vegeta. I would just like to say to Spike, hey man, I know we're really, really loud, but we should be allowed on the same stream at some point. Stop oppressing me and Spike.
Oh, man.
Closing thoughts from me. Please don't wait to get your volunteer forms in if I hadn't made it clear already. And if you have any questions, tweet me at Bob T. Goldfish on Twitter or reach out to me on the Discord. You can always find me there.
Yeah. As for me, wasn't mentioned this stream so far. I'm the tech director. So if you have any questions regarding your runs, if you're an accepted runner, we'll also be probably reaching out to you at some point for a few of you, just for clarifying questions. I know I've already done it for a few individuals. Or if you just have anything, like I mentioned before, with, registering hotels, anything of that nature, you can always feel free to hit us up on Twitter or Discord. Most of the staff can at least direct you to who the right individual is.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have any questions about the games, including your own questions about your own runs, you can ask them throughout the rest of the show. I'll be around watching and at the end of the show. Or if you want to do it privately, you can send a Discord DM to myself, High Spirits. You can send one to Plexel, or you can email committee@rpglimitbreak.com, and we will gladly go into talking about your games, your submissions, why not they were accepted, or whatever thoughts we had on it. So if there's something you need to know and you want to do it privately, you can get a hold of us, and we will gladly talk with you.
I have a question. Why is Mystic Quest?
You know, you're not the only because it was submitted, and every game.
No. Why,
every
not
game
why
that's
is it in the
submitted-
marathon? Just why?
Because every game that gets submitted has an equal opportunity to be in the marathon. That is why.
Okay. Well,
And we rolled the dice, and it came up positive.
Well, thank you everyone for listening to us here during this little intermission in the games breakdown. So let's throw it back to what you're actually here for, to hear about games and not hear people talking about absolute things that aren't games. So we'll throw it back to Ghost Kumo and Spike Vegeta.
And big shout outs to our staff crew right there. Talking a little bit about the event and just, again, and y'all excited to come out and enjoy RPG Limit Break 2023. We'd be happy to have you all. Back here, GK and I talking about the rest of the schedule. We talked, like I said, 23 of the games beforehand. And now we're going to be talking Wednesday through Saturday, all the closing games of this marathon. Let's jump right into it, GK, starting off with a game series that on the surface I wouldn't think would be at an RPG Limit Break, but it turns out there's an RPG, Zone of the Enders, The Fist of Mars.
So, as a real quick aside/footnote, this actually isn't the first time a Zone of the Enders has been offered to Limit Break.
Wow.
Although it was usually the PS2 games. That was mostly because my buddy, All the Highwinds, who had record at the time in 2, really just, he liked the game and wanted to offer it. But yeah, so this is like a strange series to actually see in the submissions. It was like the thing that Zone of the Enders, like 1, like 2 was a pretty solid action game, but like what 1 was most famous for was it was a game you bought that happened to have the demo for Metal Gear Solid 2 on it. Like,
Yeah.
both that game and 2 were produced by Hideo Kojima. And then like several other people at, I can't remember the name of the development studio, but they worked with Konami to make this game, which it's in all likelihood you probably haven't heard of. This is The Fist of Mars, and it is a strategy RPG, which there aren't actually a ton of for this event. We didn't see too many offers of things like Disgaea, for instance, which has kind of had a pretty steady presence at Limit Break. So there hasn't been like a ton of strategy RPGs. So this ends up actually kind of filling one of those spots. And let me go ahead and just... So it should be the very last one alphabetically. I'm pretty sure this is the last submission alphabetically. But yeah, so I have a very quick clip here from runner Captain O'Malley's stream and submission video. But what this game is it's like... Oh, my video feed was acting up. So this is like a strategy RPG that... It kind of reminds me of like Super Robot Wars, for instance. Like I kind of think a little bit like Advance Wars looking at this just aesthetically, because this was an early Game Boy Advance game, but definitely a lot of Super Robot Wars. And like one of the weird mechanics is it has like this dexterity mechanic where you're supposed to actually aim at your opponent and fire at them, which I was watching this with the run. I was like, what is going on with this game? And it's kind of one of the things that I really appreciate about Limit Break is we have a lot of the Final Fantasies. We have a lot of these like classic names. I know we're going to point out Final Fantasy a lot, but it's in the name of the marathon, practically Limit Break, just kind of to compare. But there's a lot of these games that like, I mean, even though this is a series people have heard of, you have a lot of these like deep cuts that get into the marathon. So, and, these kinds of games get these spots in the marathon. And, the people who work on them tend to be really invested in, putting on these kinds of interesting games, showing off these games that people haven't heard of, but that they, really appreciate. And I always enjoy just like watching a run by a runner who, like really wants to showcase that kind of game. I've done that myself a few times at marathons.
Yeah, it's always interesting, of course, to watch, excuse me, for like, the bigger games that there are hundreds of runners for, you're watching like the cream of the crop and kind of the whole history. There's going to be a Summoning Salt video about these games, but it's also nice to see just like, here's a community of maybe 3 people or less that have just passion project put together the routing of this game. And
I believe the only other name that I saw on the leaderboard was like PMC Trilogy, who runs just like every game with mechs in it. So I was like not surprised to see that name on there too much. But yeah, it's this is one of those runs I'm interested to see how it does with the marathon. This will be kicking off Wednesday morning. And then coming up right after that is Saga Scarlet Grace Ambitions by Kashiwame.
Yeah, I gotta make sure I hit the ga right there. Saga Scarlet Grace. Yeah, this is just another interesting run to see here. It's kind of a modern iteration of kind of a classic franchise. The Saga series has been at a lot of RPG line breaks in the past. Kind of a staple series in the middle of the marathon. And another spot where we're getting to see a little bit of Japanese representation here with Kashiwame, another remote run right here. That I'm always going to be a big advocate for, just more people who can't necessarily make it out to the events live. Cool to showcase that a little bit. And just looking at the run itself, first time I was just kind of just doing a little bit of research on it. Just once again, gorgeous visuals, beautifully done soundtrack inside of it as well. So very easy to watch and appreciate. And just how you cycle through all the different characters that you're utilizing in each fight, and then the payoff combat that comes afterwards visually, very, very appealing. So as someone who knows nothing about the Saga series, this was a very interesting watch from the research standpoint, and excited to have it here at the marathon on Wednesday.
Yeah, so there was like a long break between this game and the previous Saga game, which we'll get to that one a little bit later. That one has a fun story that I want to tell so badly with this marathon. But it's cool to see the international representation, and it's cool to see a variety of Saga games, kind of like you said, a staple series at this marathon. The next game we have, this takes us back to the early days of Limit Break.
I didn't even know we had done this non-ancient cave style at all.
Yeah, so back then I believe the game was far less busted in terms of like glitches and RNG manipulations. So what has tended to happen in a lot of these SNES games is people solve kind of how to like really break them. And when you turn a game very heavily RNG manipulated, it becomes kind of a different ball game. There's definitely really cool things about heavily manipulated runs, Golden Sun, Game Boy Fire Emblem games. But there's also like an appeal to running the games in a way that, you have to like strategize around different things rather than just use the same strategy as quickly as possible.
Sure.
Very different kinds of beasts there for routing and for running. And so we have Puexel, who, if you don't already know, owns and runs the channel.
Kind of a big deal, kind of a big name for this marathon.
And runs all manner of predominantly SNES RPGs, not exclusively. Running this game that's like one of the like fan favorites of the SNES library. Like a lot of the people just absolutely love Lufia 2 in particular. I know the game has like 3 other games in the series of varying respect, but it's kind of like it hybridizes like a lot of concepts that you saw in like SNES era Zelda games to like a turn-based RPG. It's got a lot of really cool systems, fantastic soundtrack. A game that I think a lot of us would love to see get re-released, but hasn't for, I think, licensing reasons. So it kind of maintains its status as like a beloved, somewhat obscure, but like cult classic tier of SNES RPGs. And it's going to be interesting seeing, the main game come back as opposed to Ancient Cave, which is a fantastic run. I love watching Ancient Cave runs, but it kind of is like a roguelike built into the Lufia system. So, seeing the more extensive routing at work, seeing, kind of the story and like the context behind the music of the game.
Yeah, it's like you say, kind of a little more cult classic in the Super Nintendo. And that's just because the Super Nintendo, just like the PS1 back in the 90s, was so deep in terms of just amazing RPGs that even going down to the second and even third tier, you're still going to get stuff that is going to be absolutely beautifully done here at a Limit Break, in a Limit Break situation. So looking forward to watching that. I'll always watch anything that Puexel takes on. Another consummate professional speedrunner. Always puts on a good show at any event he does. And then we've got a little mini baby Ultima block, one of the OGs of RPGs in general.
Oh yeah, so a personal story. About 5 years ago, I did a panel at a convention where I discussed the history of mainly bad JRPGs, but I kind of felt like I had to tell the history of early JRPGs. And so you can't tell the history of early JRPGs without getting into the history of early RPGs in general. There was tabletop games in the 60s. You had the original pen and paper Dungeons and Dragons and a few other games that came after that. Video games were just starting up in arcades and personal computers in the very early 80s. There was a game, I believe it's called Akalabeth, made by a guy who would later go on to make the Ultima series. Ultima, as far as I could tell, is one of the first 3 or so commercially released RPGs in history. If there are any more than that, they are very obscure. This predates Wizardry. This predates the Black Onyx, which is the first JRPG. This is the OG grand poop, the granddad of all RPG video games. I know Oregon Mike has worked on running a lot of the originals, and I believe they ran this for Questing for Glory fairly recently. We took a look at all 3 of them, and it's just kind of like a history lesson, but I do know that people also really love these games. So it'll be interesting to see just kind of that, a game that old and see how, you're able to break it. Because a lot of those games had really simple coding, but also they were robust and they were made by people who truly wanted to share their love for RPGs in a video game format. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly we can do that. How quickly that one can be done. And then to segue off of that, we have Ultima 7, The Black Gate. Now, Ultima 7 is, I believe, late 90s games, if not early 2000s. But if there's one game in this series that seemed to pop up whenever I look up what is the best game in this series, what is the most beloved game in this series, 7 tended to be the one that came up the most.
Yeah, I feel like that's the one that, even as someone, I had never heard of the Ultima series too much. I'm old, I'm not quite there yet. I feel like 7 was always the one that I always heard about. So it's cool seeing Gyre get to showcase kind of the one that sticks out among the franchise, along with kind of also taking it back to the OG days in Ultima 1.
Mm-hmm. I kind of like seeing these RPG history lessons. They also work really well at a 30-minute kind of run, because even if the game isn't necessarily the most easy to parse, it's not it doesn't take up an exceptionally long part of your time. But yeah, so it's cool to see these games getting offered. Last Limit Break we had Ultima 4 and Ultima 6, so now we have 1 and 7, which is going to be a pretty cool little mini block there.
Yeah, another incentive just throw out there, because again, want to kind of showcase a few of these throughout the marathon. If you want to see a bonus any % run for Ultima 7, Gyre will be throwing that out there as well. Because you can imagine the run's already at I believe it was at the no major glitches. That'll be good ending, no debug room. Already down to 35 minutes. We're going to watch the game be done in 5 minutes, potentially right after that. So if you want to add a little bit more to the marathon, make sure you'll be getting the donations for that incentive right there. And then we go into another massive franchise right here. Decide to go with Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind for this marathon by Musical Daredevil.
Yep. This is another one of our remote runs, and surprisingly, Morrowind is of the 5 Elder Scrolls games, this is the only one that has not been run at Limit Break. It was once on the channel for a Questing for Glory event. But this game is just so busted.
The estimate is 26 minutes. This is all main quests. 80% I think is like 3 minutes in this game if you wanted to do.
Yeah, it's like 3 minutes. You just glitch the heck out of the game. The movement in this run kind of has to be seen to be believed. I don't have a clip for this, but only because it's such a short run that I feel like if I were to show a highlight of this run, I would have shown like a quarter of the entire run.
We were talking about in the time we've been talking about it, the 80% run is like done right now. So
exactly.
I just love seeing all main quests 26 minutes. That's to do all of the things. So that's, yeah. Musical Daredevil, also a good friend of ours. Hilarious. Be good at showcasing the game. So definitely looking forward to that one. And then after that, another game near and dear to my heart. We've got Kingdom Hearts 2 in our second randomizer of the marathon. We got 3 absolutely amazing runners in Sonic Shadow Silver 2, Zack the Robot, and J Hobbs that'll be throwing down in the chain logic for this. And just like we were talking about for Final Fantasy Mystic Quest, again, I think all sorts of different games can be interesting from a randomizer standpoint. You have to find what the game of it is. And for Cage 2, once again, it very much is that build. That build-based randomizer. There's so many amazing combat and movement tools, different magics that you can find in the game that make for very distinct different ways that you will handle every single different mob situation, fight situation. I know we got a couple of clips right here from Sonic Shadow Silver 2 going through some of the world that never was, taking on different enemies, utilizing all the different forms at your disposal, knowing to jump into your attacks before you throw up a magnet with final form so you can get off that chain damage, but also be able to keep your nimble movement afterwards and not lock yourself to the floor. I know Sonic's going to come here. I'm not sure if we're going to get into the Xigbar fight or not coming up on this bit, but this is one of the various kind of walls for a lot of people getting into this game. You're going to watch Sonic do an absolutely masterful job of taking him down with the combination of final form and fire being able to bring him to the ground. This is bringing me into like my commentary stuff. I love how fast paced this game is and how much is going on in each fight. Just initially getting through his first 3 reaction commands right there, knocking it back, prepping the final form right there in his menu as he's waiting for the cutscene to go. And I was going to give him 3 laser attacks, wait for him to finish those out so his revenge value will be at a good spot so he knows he's going to react a certain way. And I was going to make sure he's going to go into another room so that he doesn't give him this long animation attack that would take far too long. Now popping in, reflecting back those lasers, immediately jumping to the side, and then jumping up and starting the combo. This combo would finish, but instead he drops to the ground with fire, allowing him to touch the floor, resetting that combo and going in for even more damage. As already Xigbar is down to his final 2 bars of health and is dead just like that. And that is just one of the dozens upon dozens of amazing sequences of combat, of menuing, of out-of-bounds skips that you're potentially going to get throughout the course of this run. And again, the beauty of it is you don't know what you're going to get. It's a randomizer. It's going to be different every single time you do it. Another one, I'll just let this one play for itself here in the background. I just want to talk a little bit about our 3 runners because they are very much world-class. J Hobbs, what is there to say about J Hobbs that hasn't already been said? One of the premier commentary voices in just speedrunning in general. Big passion for the Kingdom Hearts series. He's been working on the series in general right now. He offered the entire series of it. For this limit break, got to be a part of the Cage 2 randomizer race. We got Zack the Robot, one of the top 10 runners in Cage 2 randomizer, which means a lot actually with how brimming this community is, and one of the couple of devs that just keeps adding stuff to the randomizer all the time. I'm sorry, Zack, for all the requests that I have for you to put into it. And then you get Sonic Shadow Silver 2, without a doubt, one of the premier runners of Cage 2 Randomizer, has run a ton of games in the series and just unbelievable skills. I always like to throw out there, you imagine playing this action RPG, imagine playing it on a keyboard, which is how he does it. I'm not a KBM player at all, He does the whole thing on a keyboard, which absolutely blows my mind. The dexterity he has to pull out to be able to do that. So very happy for all three of them. All three of them good friends of mine. And Cage2 Randomizer has just absolutely blown up the last like 2-3 years in this community. Very excited to have it as part of the marathon in such a primetime slot.
I knew the second we saw this on there, like both Ghoul and I knew, like as soon as we invited you in and we went through some of the runs, like I kind of want to just get Spike talking about this game, because if there is one thing I know that I can expect to hear him just like rave and make sound like the most interesting thing on the planet, it's like Kingdom Hearts 2 randomizer. Like, so I've only ever finished the first Kingdom Hearts game. I promise I will get to number 2, but I have seen the game at a couple limit breaks in the past, and I'm always just blown away at what runners can do in this game.
Well, and again, we go back to the same things you were saying about FF13, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, where like you can, like people try, no, it's not the way. It kind of is. You can press X and you can get through this video game. The speed runs truly, because you're going through at such a low level and you have such weird tool sets and a randomizer here, it brings out the best in the combat system.
Yeah. It's really cool to just see that stuff at a high level. You sent me that clip of the Zigbar fight, and I was just like, dang, I don't think that... I might not be the most astute with this game, but I don't think you're supposed to be able to do that. And that's in a randomizer, too.
That's in a randomizer with just a random little shoebox of tools that Sonic was able to throw together and still delete him in about 37 seconds. It was great. But anyways, I know I could talk about Cage2 Rando till the sun comes up. Let's talk about another Saga game, but there's no capitalized G here, so it's just unlimited Saga.
Okay, this story will probably end up getting told when this gets at the event, but I have to say it because it's one of the funniest things to do with our community. Back at the very first RPG limit break, we had a lost and found for things that, we had 40-ish people in one place over the span of a week. Naturally, people are going to misplace things and lose things. People turn them in, there'd be a lost and found, and by the end of the week, everything got back to its original owner, except a copy of this game. Nobody knew whose it was, why it was there, and this game has a bit of a reputation, at least in the West. Japan, I know, had a much nicer reputation. This game has a reputation of being very obtuse, very difficult, and not exactly super beloved amongst the Western fandom. We were there was the running joke that somebody left this copy and they didn't want it back. As it turns out, that copy belonged to Chaos, the runner of this game. He eventually got it back and decided that he was interested in running and routing this game. And kind of in a similar way to what we've talked about with bringing the most out of a game, in this case, it's a game that a lot of people had a hard time grasping. This is one of those kinds of games where it's like, when you get a speedrunner, you get somebody who actually like works through the systems to understand it at a much more intricate level. And I know Chaos has put in quite a lot of work. And despite everything we've joked about this game, from what I understand, he does enjoy the speedrun quite a bit, and he likes talking about this game. So what ended up happening there just leads to a funny story.
And that's not the first time I've heard that in speedrunning, where just like you end up with a game. Sometimes it's like out of a bargain bin, and you go, you know what? It's the keys are on Animorphs thing, right? Or you start routing and you find out like, oh, this actually has some really interesting stuff to it. So love Chaos, love getting to showcase here Unlimited Saga at the marathon. And then completing out our Wednesday, we have got our Shin Megami Tensei representation in this marathon, Digital Devil Saga 2 this time.
Yeah, this is a continuation of Digital Devil Saga 1, which was in 2018 by Pink Pajamas. Freedom Pulse has just been a great Shin Megami Tensei runner, running all manner of games in the series. So we're completing the duology there, and also, the third of, I believe, 3 total turn-based RPGs on the PS2. The press turn system is one of my favorites. I love seeing the way that it's introduced in the speedrun to try and get the most out of the game, because the person who developed the combat system in this game just really loves giving the player more turns. And like if you like under certain conditions, and seeing speedrunners just make the most out of that system is always really interesting to me. And as High Spirits in chat is mentioning, another great soundtrack, I believe Shoji Meguro for this one.
Yeah, we have no shortage.
No
I'm
shortage of good soundtracks.
I'm
As you
not
said with
shocked to
Seagal.
hear that Shin Megami Tensei has an amazing soundtrack this marathon.
Yeah, one of these days we need to take Sonic the Dark Brother.
Dude,
So
doesn't that have a banger
There's
soundtrack?
like a couple decent songs and a couple infamously bad ones.
Oh, is that what it's
I
famous?
believe-
Okay.
It'll be nice to just have a game on this list where we don't have to talk about the soundtrack.
You're like, all right, this one, this soundtrack is awful. That's so weird because it's both an RPG and it's Sonic. You would have thought a perfect marriage right there. There's no way it can be a failure of a soundtrack. What? There it is.
And speaking of classic soundtracks,
Oh my
we're
goodness.
going into Thursday, and first thing you'll notice is there's no part 2 to this, despite the fact that there is only 4 games on this slide. Technically, Final Fantasy, or technically S&T trails into this one, but this is just a banger of a day in terms of just big name games that, like, you look at the games on the schedule and you recognize all of these pretty much.
Yeah.
So may be the last one, but I'll get to that one because there is actually some really cool stuff there, even if you're not familiar with it.
Yeah. Thursday,
Final
you got
Fantasy
4
IX.
games and none of them miss.
Final Fantasy IX. So I mean, the thing you are most obligated to show anyone, like this might be like one of the peak things to show anyone in RPG speedrunning ever. So this
This
from
is a
Bomb-
top 10 speedrunning moment, is this menu. I swear.
Yes. So this is Bomb Bomb, who has currently second place and had the record at the time of this run. So this is the Pandemonium menu, I believe is what it's called, and just the sheer number of inputs per second in this to keep track of it's always mind blowing to see.
Oh. One of the greatest additions to this game that speedrunners take advantage of is the optimize button that allow you to just quickly get on what is the best equipment, but then also be able to go in and make quick adjustments. What is effectively happening in this menu is that the only way they're able to get through the end of the run, these final dozen boss fights, is to completely overhaul everything that you've got. You're selling off every piece of equipment you don't need to get just enough cash to be able to buy all of the equipment that you do need. Here are a lot of their bigger weapons, the Holy Lance, the big weapons for Freya, Steiner, and Amarant right there. Enough Phoenix Downs and high potions to get through. Now we're into part 3 of this 4-part menu, where we are optimizing all of their different pieces of equipment, adjusting it to the different pieces they need, and now going through and moving all of their abilities over. Because this is a speed run where there is not one overpowered technique in the time I'm talking about. The menu's already done. It's so incredible. It's like a 60-second menu where there's about 700 inputs, I swear, right there. Where there's not one overpowered technique in Final Fantasy IX. You are min-maxing and switching your build-up every single fight. Sometimes you need the bird killer if you're taking on anything that flies, which, by the way, anything that floats in that game is a bird. It's pretty weird. Sometimes switching over to man-eater. Sometimes you need MP attacks so you can add that little bit of extra oomph, those 1.5 times multipliers onto it. Final Fantasy IX, I think, is one of the greatest RPG speedruns of all time, and in no small part to just how cool the menus are all throughout this run. That's just one of them. That's like the highlight, but there's about a dozen or so that are almost as big as that and just as impressive to watch. And I know we're talking there about the menus and everything, but you also just got to give a shout outs to, it harkens back to the 8-player Final Fantasy X speedrun that was done a number of years ago at RPG Limit Break GK. And now we've got 5 world-class runners that are going to be co-oping this game.
Yeah, I believe all of them have a PB below 850, which is pretty darn good for this game. Is a game with quite a few cutscenes and stuff to get through, but it's just a delight to have. It's a delight of a speed run. I despite how kind of, for lack of a better word, slow 9 is relative even to other Final Fantasies, it is just an incredible run to watch the different routes, the different strats that the runners use. And it's just always a good time, and the runners just always deliver on commentary. So
Yep.
I'm
Definitely
glad
looking
to see
forward
this
to it.
one back into the marathon. Won't be closing out the marathon. This one will be on Thursday morning into the afternoon because it's so darn long. But it is, one of the premier RPG speedruns. So I'm happy to see it back in the event after 6 years. I think it's been 2017, 6 years. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And then speaking of premier RPG speedruns, like what a day Thursday is.
Yeah, go off of that into Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars. We have Millennium, who has had the record of in this game at one point. I believe is currently third. And like this kind of stuff you have to do with this game. There's a ton of interesting routes. There are some menus in this game that are really cool, kind of like the Final Fantasy IX menus. Like shout outs to RPG devs who have very responsive menus.
Thank you.
And one of the big skills of this game is you need to be able to perform the super jumps like on command, because you really they're efficient damage, and you really want to get the rewards that you get for completing 100 super jumps. So to be able to perform that in a marathon is always impressive to me. I know Millennium has run this game for a few marathons and can do that. So I'm really looking forward to seeing this one. I was on the couch for this game at Limit Break 2017. I just love watching speedruns of this game, and I'm super happy to see it back at Limit Break.
I forgot you were on the couch for that run back then. That's cool. It's kind of just like a whole portfolio of different couches you've been on, supporting different communities and RPGs and whatnot. And yeah, SMRPG. It's a quick one, honestly. It's a speedrun that flies by. And like you say, the super jumps and all the other timings and everything, you have to have nerves of steel, because once again, a theme of all RPG speedruns, you're super underleveled. You're a glass cannon right there. Mario doesn't like getting punched in the face. If you mistime any of those blocks or you don't hit the 200 super jumps, you have to get on tank head in the final boss fight.
Yeah, and kind of one of the things we mentioned, we were talking with each other about this game in our kind of prep, was this is an incredibly optimized game for a 3-hour-ish game. They've been trying to crack sub 246 for I think a couple of years now. They're trying. They've done some pretty expansive reroutes of this game to save comparatively small amounts of time, like an entire reroute of the whole game for an additional 20 seconds.
Yeah, it's nuts seeing for a speed run this long. You look at the splits; they're actually pretty consistent. You're like, all right, minus 14, down to minus 10. Losing 4 seconds is kind of a big deal all of a sudden. Yeah, this game is incredibly competitive.
Yeah, and then coming up next, we have our first Pokemon game of the marathon, Pokemon Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, which is going to be a race between the two games. Although they are the remake of Gen 3 in the Gen 6 engine, so you are going across Hoenn at roughly a similar type adventure. The opponents that you battle will be different. The Pokemon mains that you use are a little bit different because the legendaries at the end of the game are different. And you got two really good runners of this game in Corvi May and Sanjan, who both have put in a lot of work into several different games. Corvi being she's pretty active in a lot of different Pokemon games. Sanjan has she came to Limit Break, opened the marathon up last year and did really good with both the original Mass Effect and Octopath Traveler. So definitely has quite a variety of runs that she does, and she does them very well.
Yeah, both very good marathon performers. And one thing that I can always say that I think is super interesting, I'm glad more and more Pokemon speedrunners are offering this type of format for speedrunning marathons, where it's Pokemon Red versus Blue. It's which kid were you? Were you super into Red? Were you super into Blue? Which one were you? Were you the Alpha Sapphire kid or the Omega Ruby kid? And realizing that you can do two runs that are a slightly different route, but just enough to get you invested on one side or the other to have almost a team to root for. So I think that's super cool.
I'm partially pulling for whoever's running Alpha Sapphire, which I think is Corvi. I might be mistaken in that, but that is the harsher of the two, I believe.
Okay.
And then finally we have Valkyrie Profile Lenneth. And I believe this is the first time the game Valkyrie Profile has shown up on the Limit Break channel. Like,
That's
period.
nuts.
Like, period. Which is weird because they've had a Tri-Ace marathon before. If it was ever in, it would have been at that event. But there is, we've had Valkyrie Profile 2, we've had Valkyrie Profile Covenant of the Plume, the spinoff for the DS, but never the original. I know this game has quite a few cutscenes, but it did receive a remaster of, I believe, the PSP version, which is called Valkyrie Profile Lenneth, which is what we're going to be having here. And this is going to be run on the PS5 version of the game by Mocha, our third of our Japanese runners. Kind of a name worth knowing in the Japanese speedrunning scene.
This is cool.
Like, he is one of the spearheads of RTA in Japan, which is one of the biggest speedrunning marathons, period. Like, anywhere. So that was a name that I immediately immediately I perked up a little bit seeing that name on the submissions. And he's also kind of the GOAT at this game, as basically had record in just about every category of this game that I've seen. So definitely, not quite as popular of a game of the bunch, but definitely fits into the stacked lineup of games and runners here on this page. I'm going to be running a ending 100%. There's a few different endings in this game, which some of them can be a little bit shorter and less climactic. So you're just getting the definitive experience with this game. I do actually have a clip here for this game. The thing about this game for me when I was watching this was I have never played this game personally, but just watching it in motion makes me feel strangely nostalgic. Square in the 90s just had actually no, I believe this was Enix. Maybe I'm misremembering the developers, but Tri-Ace worked on it. Motoi Sakuraba's soundtrack for this game is really good. And just the sprite work and watching the game in motion just looks really cool. It has this, rather than your expansive 3D aesthetic, it's done in 2D. So there's actually quite a bit of platforming elements to this game, as you can see in certain parts of the run. And the combat system is really unique. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting to finally see this one at the event, to see a little bit of menuing action here. Although Mocha, is from Japan and will be running this from Japan, I assume. Running the English version, which I always find that kind of interesting personally.
And as someone who is English speaking, I appreciate that. Make it a little bit easier for me to follow, just that little bit, so you can actually process, just little things, names of equipment that is put on and everything. But man, the movement in this game actually looks super, super cool, and I love all the frames of animation on your character the whole time.
Yeah. People underrate sprites. I don't know what it is that people dismiss sprites for 3D models completely.
Dude, good sprite work. Give me that every day of the week. Especially there on Thursday, as we close out that portion. We got 2 days left in the marathon. Kicking off here early Friday morning with the Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky SC.
Oh boy, I get to talk about this. If you were to ask me personally what my favorite game that I have played in the last probably 10 years, it would be basically the stretch of the second half of Trails in the Sky first chapter all the way until about the final fifth of Trails to Azure. And Sky the second chapter is so near and dear to my heart. I adore this game. I love this game and this series enough that I was one of the original. Technically, it was me and Cent of all people from GDQ who made separate Trails speedrun servers before we consolidated them. And this scene grew from a handful of us dedicated fans to almost 300 people in the server now.
Wow.
Yeah. So just dedicated, series of runners. We're going to be following up on Trails in the Sky, the first chapter, which for those of you who will be watching this on YouTube, or for those of you currently in Twitch now after the stream, check out the run from that at Limit Break 2022. Just we had a fantastic time, and I believe we're gonna, we have 2 of the same runners, and then James Picard, who is also a Falcom speedrunner, who I'm glad to see him get a run at this event. But this is like a follow-up. It's kind of like, as we've mentioned with the Golden Sun, how the game had like a part 1, a part 2. Trails in the Sky has a part 1 first chapter and a part 2 second chapter. Second chapter has vastly expands on the original in terms of its mechanics, in terms of its systems, all the different kinds of things you do. It's a more tricky video game, introduces like some of my favorite pieces of video game music of all time. I know we've hyped up the soundtracks, but like this hits different for me. Like I recommend this run. I recommend the run that I hosted, but the run that we had at Limit Break last year. This is a series that's near and dear to me. It has really cool combat system, really cool community of people who've worked very hard to make these runs quick and fast, and just some really cool strats that you'll see throughout the run.
Yeah, that's awesome to see.
Also,
y'all getting to get
doing
this follow-up run after apparently last year's run did so well.
Yeah, we will be seeing glitchless, but there is an incentive to show off the glitches, and the glitches in these games can be really silly, so I definitely recommend donating that.
Anytime we can see more glitches showcased at the marathon, the better, in my opinion. Those are sometimes the most memorable parts of it.
Yeah, I can go on and on about this game, but we do have still the remaining 2 days of the event to cover here. So we have, following that, we have a game that probably doesn't need any introduction, but we will do anyway. Final Fantasy 1 Pixel Remaster. We're going to have a race between 3 really talented runners of this game, Leggy Starscream, Ice Blue, and Kagi Iniki. And they'll be running any % no quick save manip, just kind of limits the types of RNG manipulation you can do. And the Pixel Remasters of Final Fantasy 1 through 6 have really seen a big surge in the speedrunning scene and helped revitalize several of these games in the speedrunning scene. So it's definitely exciting to see one of them on the schedule once again.
Yeah, and I think it's super interesting to just process this game as a race, because obviously, like, they have added different iterations of qualities of life to Final Fantasy 1 over the years, from the extremely brutal just NES original to, the GBA version, the PS1 version, now eventually all the way up to the Pixel Remaster version here. And I still think of it as like, it's still, at the end of the day, it's Final Fantasy 1. I'm going to be very interested to see what party formations are going to be here, what are potentially going to be switching up some strategies, how do they get strong enough to just survive chaos and all of the final dungeon and whatnot. And is this the sort of race where until someone defeats chaos, all 3 of them will be in it to the very end? I think it's a very interesting take as a race game.
Indeed.
Then going into Wildermyth, a game that was alluded to all the way back in our kind of pre-show interview with High Spirits. What do we got to say here about Wildermyth?
So, having looked over the run, there's actually quite an expansive scene in indie games I've noticed recently of like fairly procedurally generated strategy games. There's at least a few of these out there, and so this is kind of getting to show off one of those in a really neat way. This game actually is pretty quick in motion, which is always nice to see for like a strategy game. So much of this game is like varies from run to run, so I enjoy. It's not quite like randomizer, but it is always interesting to see like a run where the runners have to adapt and improvise and just know the game in and out on a fundamental level to make it go fast every time. So I'm definitely I'm glad to see, indie representation. I'm glad to see, in this scene of games that maybe doesn't get a ton of love at marathons, actually have a showing like this.
Yeah, always glad the games committee is putting in more and more effort, showcase some of these games. Again, the standouts from the lesser known titles. Cool to see Wildermyth here. And the absolutely stacked Friday just keeps on going, as for the first time, Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrad, the full game is actually going to be showcased at an RPG Limit Break I'm sure they were very excited. We've got the Sid in chat with us today as they're going to be taking on new No Major Glitches hard mode right here, which is effectively the new game plus of the game. It's literally the new game plus, where you go in with like kind of your completed tool set and just showcasing all that this game's absolutely gorgeous combat system has to offer. I was kind of getting into speedrunning this game myself, and a lot of that is just from how good the combat looks. And I gotta tell you, after messing around with it a little bit, I got a lot more of the run I need to learn. You need to have the same skills of like, if you have to like play an instrument, the piano or something, the way that you are not just controlling, say, Cloud, whoever your main character is, but also maybe Tifa and Barret on either side of you at all times to hit their hotkeys for all their different actions, making sure that, like the intention of this game's design is combat-wise, that, yeah, you can let your second and third party members do whatever they want, but they're not going to build their ATB particularly fast. The way you get these fights to end as quickly as possible, absolutely incredibly difficult to do and so gorgeous to watch done in motion. I really thought the FF7 remake team did an amazing job with the combat system here. Beautiful menus as well to go along with it, and the Sid always gives fantastic commentary. So it'll be very, very interesting to see this run showcased at the marathon.
Yes, it has been with us with Limit Break for a very long time. Finally got to show off, a run of 7 integrated with the New Game Plus Yuffie intermission chapter at the last event, as well as in our kickoff stream about a month ago, I think. So it's cool to just see him get the chance to show off this game. It's, valued member of the RPG Limit Break community and one of our staff as well. So, excited to see that, but it's Final Fantasy VII, like a game so iconic that if, like I said, Final Fantasy 1 needs no introduction. This game is Final Fantasy VII is so iconic. They spent I don't know how much money to make a remake of this game that they spent years and years making. So it's one of the most iconic games. I know the remake has been very well received. It's going to be interesting to see the run. It's going to be interesting to see kind of what separates, this particular category from some other categories of the game. And yeah.
Speaking of iconic, just keep going.
Yeah, Chrono Trigger.
Yeah, it's Chrono Trigger. You're going to watch it, right? Next game. Nah, I'm just kidding. I actually have not tried to say the name. Corporate Image? Yeah, Corporate Image. I was trying to read that as an L there for a second. Corporate Image. I'm sure you did a great job. Sorry I couldn't say your name. I actually think a really interesting hybrid category. I feel like every time we've seen Chrono Trigger at major speedrunning marathons, it's either the 100% run or it's sort of a glitched any percent where you're able to like skip a lot of the different phases of Lavos and everything at the end. I actually like that we're getting something kind of in the middle here with the any percent glitchless and no RNG manipulation. This game usually is heavily RNG manipulated. They're going to be able to remove that the whole way through and try to figure out without glitches, how is it possible to get your characters through this incredibly brutal end game. I'm not even sure exactly what route they do, like when they're going to face off with Lavos and everything, if there are even potentially any like side quests or anything you may do at the end just to get a few extra tools. But in under 5 hours, you're going to see all the way to the end of Chrono Trigger with no manipulation, no glitches, anything. Should be a fun watch. And again, it is Chrono Trigger. You're going to watch it.
Yeah, if Cross has one of the best soundtracks of all time, Trigger's either slightly ahead or not far behind, depending on who you ask. We don't have a lot in terms of like SNES Final Fantasy here. We don't have 4, 5, 6 in the marathon. So Chrono Trigger's kind of, occupying that spot of like, it's not a Final Fantasy game, but it has some systems from Final Fantasy, a lot of the same names. And a lot of people who love those games also love Chrono Trigger. So that's really where we're hitting with this particular run. So this is one of my favorite games of all time. I talked about my, favorite game that I played in the last 10 years. Chrono Trigger was like top 2 of like the 10 years before that. So
dude, I'm glad to hear, because you had not played it until the last 10 years.
I played it like 2011. So I was saying since 2013, like Sky was probably one of my favorite games. Chrono Trigger was like one of my favorites from like 2003 to 2013. I played that on the DS and I loved it.
Oh, okay.
And I'm sure almost everyone, I'm sure like a good chunk of the people in chat here could just say like, I played this game and I love this game.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely one of RPG Limit Break's staples, and I'm really happy to see it getting in, kind of having a new way to show it. And then finally, we get to end with a game that hasn't been into the marathon with Atelier Ryza, pronounced Atelier. As far as I'm aware, there's some slightly weird pronunciations of this word. But yeah, this is Ryza 3, which came out last year. Now, the Ryza trilogy has kind of really, bumped this series up. So it's basically they released... This is so the studio that makes this game is Gust. They have released a game like every year for like 25-ish years or something. Like they release a lot of games, and what they tend to do is, come up with a system and then they build on it. And so Ryza 3 is like really built on the system laid forth by 1. And it has a dedicated nucleus of fans. But the first Ryza game really took off. Like I believe it actually sold over 1 million copies, which was like, elevated out of like just mere cult classic status. Watching parts of the run, it is quite broken. There's a lot of the stuff, like there's plenty of your alchemy, which is like a big part of the Atelier series. But there's also just a lot of just like breaking the game from the inside out, which is always interesting to see. And it's actually a game that looks pretty solid in motion. A lot of Gust games, they tend to be budget with a lot of heart, as is the way I would describe them. So I'm just really happy to see, Gust fans finally get a game at this marathon, because they've tried to submit many years. And what tends to be an issue with this series is you'll have a game like Monarch Chemia, or Art and Ellico 2, like are probably some of Gust's most beloved games. They're like 10 hours long, and we've had them on Questing for Glory because they're like really cool at that length. But it is admittedly harder to fit something like that on a schedule. We only have like one run about that length per marathon, so having something at like a 2.5 hours is a little easier to squeeze in there. And yeah, this is like the trilogy of these games has really, elevated this series in popularity. Haven't even talked about the runner. Lily runs a bunch of these games, and she just dominates this entire series. That's kind of one of the things I find really interesting about Limit Break is you tend to have these runners who, like, they take a series that they really like that maybe don't have a ton of speedrunners, but have a dedicated following, and you'll usually find like 1 or 2 people who are just at the top of like several of these games.
Yeah, and it was really interesting talking to High Spirits at the start of this, that it wasn't just this was the standout of the Ryza series. I'm going to say, because I don't want to say the name wrong.
The Atelier series. Ryza is the name of the protagonist. There are other Ateliers, like Atelier Sophie, Atelier Shally, which I know Ghoul really wanted to see that one offered for many years.
Mm-hmm. But it was cool to see, like, it felt like there was a goal, like, we should try to get one of these into the marathon, because they liked just the list of the submissions. This wasn't just, like, the clear standout. So maybe saying, obviously, was successful in getting into this marathon, and maybe some stuff in the future, but we'll obviously have to see. That completes our Friday set, and now we go into the finale of the marathon, the final countdown, although we start with 7 here, the final 7 games, and as you can see, 7 big-time RPG franchises all showcased here on the final day. Kicking off with our 3rd and final game of the Dragon Quest showcases this marathon. Dragon Quest V in the not 50-minute broken PS1 version. Our very own High Spirits and Purple Mario 920 going to be taking it on co-op style.
Yeah, so ended up being a fairly late thing that I decided to get a bit of footage for here. So Dragon Quest V it's kind of the Final Fantasy VI of the Dragon Quest series, in the sense that it's not the one everyone played compared to like the NES ones, or 8 and 11, which have really elevated the series in the West. But 5 is what it lacks in terms of like number of people who played it, because the DS version was the first one people in the West got to experience. Like, People love this game. Like amongst Dragon Quest fans, you ask like what the best one is. Five will come up quite often in that conversation. Very beloved story, one of the best soundtracks in the series, and there's a lot of really cool things about this game. Like you see, the main character's party has a lot of different monsters in it. We're showing off the Magman fight here, which
oh my god, this animation is gorgeous. Oh my god,
I love watching the sprite work of this game.
It's so good. Sorry, go
and
ahead.
Toriyama's designs are just great for the monsters, which you can recruit monsters in this game. This was one of the first games that ever lets you do that as in an RPG. This particular battle actually has a really cool strategy where you take out several of your party members, and then you just kind of safely whittle away the fight until you can slowly start bringing your party members back in to do additional effects. And just a bunch of interesting little routing strategies around the monsters that you get. But just moreover, it's just a beloved Dragon Quest game. So I'm really happy to see this one starting off our final day of the marathon. High spirits, consummate runner, professional, just definitely was a name associated with the Dragon Quest series. But I'm also super happy to see Purple Mario running these games. Very dedicated Dragon Quest runner who was originally going to be a part of a co-op run of Dragon Quest VIII in 2018. Sadly couldn't make it to the event. Hoping he makes it to this event. I met him in person finally at Last Limit Break. Just a genuinely delightful person that I'm really happy to see get to run this game.
Very strong way to kick off our Saturday. And now, would you believe me if I said the TurboGrafx 16 has as much representation as the Genesis right here, funny enough. Just didn't have a lot of Genesis offers, but we got one of the best right here in Phantasy Star 4. Bick, my man, coming back to somehow showcase this game being completed in 42 minutes. How is that?
So I don't have a clip for this, but I do have a picture that I can just show you as a screenshot to give you an idea of what the kind of run that we are in for is. Let me center this a little better. So yeah, this is one of the screens in the game of just the kind of shenanigans that menus can enable. If you're familiar with the term we use in Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga, it kind of reminds me of Pixel Vomit.
This looks like a 42-minute RPG speedrun right there. That screams 42-minute RPG speedrun.
I was looking through Bick's old run of this game, which is like 31 minutes long, and I'm like, okay, what part can I take from this run? And it's like a lot of it, like it seems kind of normal, and you just kind of break the game with the menus. And I'm like, I don't need a clip for this. I just need one picture.
Sold.
Yeah, so this is our Genesis game. It's one of the most beloved RPGs of all time. And we're finally showing it off glitched after having two mostly glitchless versions of this run. Speaking of glitched, this bozo that I got to talk about afterwards.
This guy. What's the deal with this guy?
All right.
Somehow this is slightly less broken than the game before it. Not much, though, it seems like.
Yeah, so East 9 Monster Nox, about a 30 to 40 hour casual RPG, depending on how much you like to do. It is, I believe, 8 chapters. It's been a while since I played this game in a not busted state. And the way I described it in the pitch is, imagine a JRPG where you're in a town and most of the parts of the town are closed off, and you open them up over the course of the game. But the things that open up are like these large translucent barriers that you clear stuff through the game and slowly open up. They put Endgame's trigger in one of the parts of the main town. They give you like Spider-Man powers in this game. Like you can just shoot yourself over to you can just like dash over in midair to like a long distance point that just happens to look interesting. You can run up walls, you can fly. You can just do a bunch of these things, and they just ask you politely to not break the game. The problem is we have we have a fellow named Jado in the community who, if you've ever followed Pokemon Shining Pearl, was a part of that development, but is largely responsible for utterly shattering like half of the entire East series. He is responsible for making this even more busted, and I say that because this game was stupid busted before it ever made it to the States. The Japanese community for this game brought it down to like an hour and 15 minutes, like just sequence breaking the tar out of it, because they put the trigger for endgame in the first town, and there are so many ways to break it. I promise you, this is actually a really well-programmed game. It is also one that if you know what you're doing, you will destroy it.
That blows my mind that they were like, here's Spider-Man powers, and we're going to start you next to the final area. Like, there's certain things that I think there's certain skips in speedrunning that I'm sure devs would be like, oh yeah, we kind of figured that would be a thing. This has to be one of them. This cannot be like confusing to them that y'all figure out how to do this before the game even fully came out stateside.
The funny thing is, there are several glitches unique to each game, but there are also several that are similar across each game. And I don't know if they're like, nobody will run into this, or if they just don't know. Falcom has a fairly bang development schedule, so they might have just missed some of it. But there are some skips that are like consistent across the series, which is really funny to me. But yeah, tremendously broken run. About like a quarter of the run is just spent making sure you don't get like absolutely eviscerated in the end game. So I love this run. That's why I'm doing it. That's why I offered it. I'm glad to see it in the schedule. We have an incentive, which I will plug because we're plugging incentives, to show off the debug room, which my friend Jado, who I mentioned, who helped break this game, helped find out how to access. But yeah, enough about me. Let's talk about well, 3 of these runners actually have already been talked about, but we'll talk about them some more. So Octopath Traveler 2, a sequel to the beloved Octopath Traveler of 2018. And nearly everyone I've talked to about this game has told me, like, this is a just a big-time improvement over a lot of the issues many people had with the first game, which, I mean, people really like the first game. So yeah, if you're improving on that, you're doing a pretty good job. I actually used to run the first game, and I saw the run for this, and it's just like, you move faster, things go faster, combat flows faster because there's speed up options. Just watching this game in motion is a delight as an RPG fan myself.
Yeah, just kind of like your wish for any sequel that it's going to be. They took already what was a great game and they fixed what little they had to, and it just flows perfectly, the kind of the full realization of it. And yeah, these games are just gorgeous, man.
Yeah, it's the Unreal Engine 4 at work. I actually think this game has quite a few aesthetic improvements over the first game. It does help that they're running it on PC, which the original was on Switch and capped 30 frames per second, so that definitely helps. But yeah, we have any percent, which is quite a wide variety of the game. We have a couple of incentives for this run as well. Some language bid wars. We have plenty of bid wars, plenty of naming incentives across the marathon, and then starting character and stuff like that. There's also a train here, which I don't know when Quadra sent me a link to this clip. You realize the significance of fighting a train. I
was gonna say, I know from Final Fantasy VI, there's obviously.
I'm like, I have to put a train in this. It's just watching the numbers fly and just the inputs per second of just like knowing exactly what you're supposed to do damage in like boss fights in this game. It just looks really clean and really smooth. It's just the stuff that I love about RPG speedruns.
Yeah, there's all of just like the way the menu snaps on from the right side, and you can see quickly, immediately snapping to the first thing that they need. Just how the camera moves over. Like, this is where a lot of people say, turn-based RPGs can look absolutely gorgeous done fast.
Agreed.
That going into another longtime speedrun marathon performer. We got Kirby Masta here running one of the, I believe he offered Fire Emblem 11, 12, 13. 14 that got in, and 15. So there was no shortage of offers. And even within this one, keep in mind, offered those 5 games. This one's also a 3-way route bid war within 1/5 of those Fire Emblem submissions that Kirby Mesa threw out there. And Kirby always does an amazing job showcasing Fire Emblem.
The last time I saw Kirby run this, what I think really kind of impressed me and stood out to me, and like Kirby's a friend, and so donate for Revelation. Why would you want to suffer like that, Kirby? The thing that I appreciated the last time I saw Kirby run this game for a marathon was he actually kind of went out of his way to like help make this run easy enough to parse, because this is actually, these games, once they got to like the DS and you get to Shadow Dragon where you have like press start to skip things, they can be really like input intensive and almost kind of hard to follow, and Kirby does a very good job of making it palatable, and it's one of the things that I appreciate about it.
Yeah.
The 3 route bid war between Birthright, Conquest, and Revelations. I know Revelations is like janky, and so Kirby's asking for it in chat, so you can either donate to Honor His Wishes or donate to Conquest to have better taste, or donate to Birthright because you'll want to mess with everybody.
For taste. All right, we've got our different sides of the ring. Y'all can decide what you want that to be. Last big 3-way bid war of the marathon there in Fire Emblem 14. And I do agree with you. I love Kirby is one of the very best in the business at being able to make it palatable to people who have maybe never even played one of these games. You know, he'll sometimes even take like a 1 or 2 second time loss to make sure it's a little more digestible for an audience member, of showcasing like, look at these troops over in the corner or something. Very, very well done by Kirby every time. Looking forward to the run. Then we got our second of our 2 Pokemon runs, Pokemon Legends Arceus. Obviously a very different style Pokemon game that came out last year. And Valkyrie's going to be taking it on 80% style. 3 hours and 50 minutes.
Getting basically the full game run. It was in GDQ fairly recently, but it was like a 2/3 of the game with a few added things at the end there. Valkyrie is like really put in so much work. Like I roomed with him at last Limit Break, and like I swear he spent probably 1/3 of his time at the event just either in the practice room or in like our room, just like working on grinding out record, because I think somebody took it from him and he really wanted to beat it. Like he's really put in a ton of work to optimize this game and make it fast. And this is kind of one of the more unique Pokemon games released. There's a lot heavier focus on things like exploration and catching, and a lot more focus on, you know, kind of the core elements of Pokemon that don't necessarily get seen a lot in the speed run, because, you know, typically in the speed run you take whatever your like strongest, most efficient Pokemon to run, and then you just bulldoze the rest of the game. Legends Arceus is a lot more focused on elements of Pokemon you don't quite see as often in speedrunning, so I'm definitely excited to see that.
Yeah, I think this. I imagine Arceus, as soon as it came out, this was going to be at basically every major speedrunning marathon for the next year. That like there is more of a focus, like you say, on captures. Everything flows super fast in this game. It's a Pokemon game with a dodge roll button. That's all you really need to know. This is cool. We're getting to showcase on the last day.
Mm-hmm. And then last but not least, we got to talk about Kingdom Hearts 3.
We got to talk about Kingdom Hearts 3. And again, one of the first times, is this the first time I want to say that Limit Break is showcasing the full game at their marathon? It might
Correct.
be.
We had a bit of an incentive from Violin, who closed out our marathon last year with Kingdom Hearts 1, brought out a part of this game to show off as an incentive. Now we're finally getting to showcase this one. This game is kind of the unfortunate, for lack of a better term, victim of timing. So it came out like just barely after the Limit Break submissions for the 2019 event, and then was offered to get into 2020.
That's right.
And 2020 event never happened. And then Ecchi offered to do it last year, but Ecchi also had a deferred run of Pokemon Sword and Shield. And so this one ended up being, you know, shelved for that. Finally, we're getting to see this game in action, you know, one of the most like anticipated games probably of all time. And you actually got us a clip here to show off of like one of the things that you say that this
Yes.
game does. It's a little bit different from like what you know for Kingdom Hearts games, but
Yeah.
as much, but like with the engine that they moved it to, with moving it to Unreal, the game just looks it looks different in motion and like has some really cool movement portions.
Yeah, get to see a little bit of, once again, the fun menuing right here. I just love that, by the way, Etchy is doing this run. I primarily know Etchy as a Pokemon speedrunner, obviously, but he's going to be going right after Pokemon, showing off this game. Still lots of cool combat options that they're going to take on everything, but I really think where this game shines compared to the rest of the series is all of its movement options and how they are chained together. People make fun of this is Arendelle, the frozen world, where like, yeah, they throw you down this mountain like 3 times. Oh, this world kind of sucked. But in the speedrun, this is the best world. Watching them have to climb that mountain over and over and over again. Man, Kate Bush should be proud. Look at all of this. Chaining onto an enemy, dashing to them to get across the screen a little sooner, being able to pound into the wall, to jump up off of that, off a little wall kick, using some of the intended mechanics right there, and then also doing swings mid-air so you don't lose any height. There's so many cool ways to chain together so many movement options. And this on top of the fact that, yes, there is menuing and there is combat in addition to all of this throughout the run. It's Etchy, has a top, I believe, in 6th place for this run right now, so going to do a very admirable job of showcasing the game and all of its strategies over the years. But yeah, I'm super happy to see Kingdom Hearts 3 getting this first time kind of full-on RPG Limit Break showcase with an incentive to bring it back from last year. Yozora, Violent,
even more hype. I believe there's even more crap being added to make it more difficult for Violent.
Yeah, couldn't make this hard enough for him with all the pro codes and everything can be thrown on. A little incentive that I imagine will cost a pretty penny to have him take it on blindfolded again at the end of the marathon. So Etchy and Violent gonna absolutely kill it as the closers to your RPG Limit Break 2023 schedule. The 49 amazing games we're gonna get to showcase this year.
Yep. So obviously that's it for us with the main line of the schedule. As we mentioned, there's a lot of incentives. We're still waiting on some of them because the schedule has been out for just a week. We need to iron out a few things, make sure we know how long that those are going to affect the schedule. But definitely when the event comes July 16th, all of your donations, you can put those towards many of these awesome incentives to see things that maybe you wouldn't see on a person's individual stream. And of course, you'll be donating to an absolutely fantastic cause, one that's near and dear to many of us on staff. One of the reasons why we continue to support them, that being, of course, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, aka NAMI. And if we're talking about them, just as a brief aside, like, just remember, you're not alone. There's all kinds of resources out there to see about getting help. I definitely recommend visiting NAMI.org. May is National Mental Health Awareness Month. We are still in May at the time of this stream and at the time of this recording. You can check out their website at NAMI.org. And while we aren't hosting the event in the month of May for this year, we are still supporting this great cause come July.
Yeah.
So I hope y'all will check that out. Yep, I hope y'all will donate. I hope y'all will check out the marathon. I think we have an absolutely stacked schedule on our hands. I mentioned, we were hyped even for the backups list. So in the unfortunate event that any of these runs,
Second Stream Underground, let's do it. Yeah.
Man, that takes me back. The bonus stream days, not with Limit Break, just like in marathons in general. Yeah, if heaven forbid any of these runs don't make it, there's still plenty of awesome runs that'll be off of the backup schedule. So the show here slightly subject to change between now and the event itself. So if come time of the event you see any slight differences between this and then, something might have happened. Which Limit Break is actually, I don't think we've had to pull from the backups list too often, although we have had a couple instances where we got really far ahead and pulled a couple runs off of there. That's how we got stuff like Final Fantasy VII Intergrade and Xenoblade Chronicles Future Connected last year. So yeah, I hope y'all enjoyed the menu or menu.
The menus were very
The
cool.
menu- the menus
Watch
were
that
really cool. I hope
FF9
y'all
one again. That was good. That was good stuff.
Yeah, I hope y'all enjoyed the marathon. Got a stacked lineup of runners here. And really quick, just want to say thanks to my host Spike. He came in fairly last minute. Ghoul and I had been wanting to do this for a while, and Ghoul is like a couple weeks ago said, "Hey, I can't make it, but I got this awesome fella lined up here to help us out with this."
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been something that I thought would be really cool to showcase for years now for different major marathons. So shout outs to Puexel and everybody over at RPG Limit Break who thought this would be a good idea and greenlit it. I love just anything that just gets more people coming in to just kind of see, because a week is a long amount of time, even in RPG sense. We're like, yeah, we're just talking about 49 runs here. But just to stop and look at it and say, wow, there really is so much cool stuff, even some of the games that we've never heard of. So, yeah, I hope this is something we can do more of in the future. And looking forward to this amazing event, RPG Limit Break 2023, with this absolutely stacked games lineup with incredible runners across the board, all for an amazing cause. GK, thanks for having me, bud.
Absolutely. So we're going to do a bit of an outro section here. Once again, bringing in High Spirits. For any of y'all who still might have any questions, I posted a link in the schedule in chat. For those of you who will be maybe watching a VOD, maybe watching on YouTube, you can go to rpglimitbreak.com for more information about the event, including the schedule, the tracker, registration, volunteering. We are looking for both on-site and remote volunteers, so even if you can't make it out, we still have things that we could use your support on. And yeah, for those of you checking out on the VOD, check out the marathon. How you doing, High Spirits?
Spike, you might have made a small mistake at the end there.
What I do?
Now it's my turn to sell a little bit. You said that there was 49 runs in the marathon, correct?
Correct.
Well, some people might know this game right here called Dragon Quest VII. It is infamously known as a 100 to 200 hour RPG. For a donation incentive after Dragon Quest V, I will beat the final boss of this game in under 5 minutes from start to end.
We had to get to the
games
big
you could
50.
have.
Game number 50. Get it in the marathon.
Yeah, I will show you how to beat this game in under 5 minutes.
Wow. From the start, not just loading the file at the final.
From the start, from console on to the final hit on the final boss.
What? All right, Jack. I'm going to sell you on that incentive.
I didn't see that on the incentive list. I'm like, I want to see that.
Yeah, so that's a surprise when we added at the end there. So, but yeah, it was great listening to you to discuss the schedule and everything. Got all the good, a lot of good information out there. Yeah, and we're excited for the event this year. Obviously, I'm excited as part of the games committee because I helped form the games list and the schedule and all that stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of good incentives. There's still more being added. We're trying to poke and prod some runners to try to get some more incentives or get some things.
Like a little one-handed, little blindfold to get thrown in a Shark Tank, whatever.
Yeah, beat game in 5 minutes. Things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, y'all did. You guys, everybody over at the games committee should be very proud of the list and the schedule you put together. I think perfect pacing throughout the marathon, jumping back and forth between some high profile games, showcasing a lot of indie titles and lesser known retro games and whatnot. I really think it was kind of a perfectly put together schedule. I love Crisis Core starting it up. I love KH3, especially with the blindfolded showcase closing it out. So much good stuff.
Yeah, it was. It's always difficult because there's some more things that we talked about a lot that we wanted to do. Like one of the big things is the wacky block. That's a thing that appears, but sometimes we didn't have enough. I would say we didn't have enough wackiness to really make a whole block, which was kind of sad because we tried to fit it in there, but.
Yeah.
There's things that you could have moved around, done a little differently, but I think we're very happy with the schedule. Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core was probably the easiest choice to make for the opener. And Kingdom Hearts 3 we decided on pretty quickly was the finale. There are the backup lists, in case something happens. You got people traveling, life happens, things happen. So,
Okay, really quick as an aside, I grabbed a Vivi plush that I had up on the top of my cabinet here, only to realize, oh, that's a golem. I thought that was Vivi.
Yeah, this is a golem,
Yeah. I submitted a Dragon Quest game. How did I not get that?
How can you not know the iconic golem,
Well, so I've never played a Dragon Quest game. I just assumed it was a Dragon Quest. And then as soon as you pull out the Vivi, I was like, oh, is this?
It has the eyes.
I can promise you the Dragon Quest hats will be on for the Dragon Quest V.
Yay!
I don't care if Mario protests or whatnot. He is getting a slime hat. And anyone else who wants to join on the couch. But yeah, so again, anyone that has any questions about the games list, our thoughts or anything, feel free to ask at any time. You can ask in the Discord, or you can, if you want a more private explanation or discussion, you can message me on Discord at High Spirits. You can message Plexel, the owner of this channel. You can see his name right there in chat. And or you can email committee@rpglimitbreak.com, and we will gladly talk about the submissions and maybe even offer up some advice, or just go over some ideas and things that you have, and good discussion, so we could try to help out everyone with their submissions, because the only way you have a chance to get a game into the marathon is to submit it.
Yeah, very much. And one thing I would like to mention here is kind of, related to all this. Running RPGs can be quite a lot of fun. And a lot of times it's a passion project by a small group of people. So don't be nervous to submit. Some games that we wouldn't have ever heard of ended up showing up here, and we have some really cool speed runs. So if y'all are thinking of submitting to go to Limit Break, just go ahead and submit. And this was the marathon that got me wanting to speed run myself, and since then I have met so many great people in this community, including both of the other fellows on this, as well as the one who we're gonna do a quick credits thanks to people, but definitely a big shout outs to Ashen for helping on the back end for getting this all set up.
Thank you, Ashen.
Thank you, Ashen.
So yeah, this was the marathon that really got me invested in speedrunning, and now I've been a part of it for close to 7.5 years, and it's been a big part of my life ever since then. So if you're at all hesitating to go, I would say from personal experience, don't be. It's an awesome event. I am now at the position of staff now, but it's largely because this is an event that I've always valued and I've always enjoyed doing. So RPGs are cool.
I'm glad we tricked you into joining the community. You are a wonderful addition to it. You have helped many runs and many couches over the years. Absolutely.
Hey, that poster that's sitting over my shoulder here of Millie? That was actually a prize that I won from the first RPG Limit Break.
Oh,
because it had that
back to the day.
He had that Tales of Xillia run, and I was hosting for that run too. So I was up all night with y'all, and yeah. That was my prize for donating during that run.
All right. So, do either of you have any final closing comments? I think I've got my piece out.
Yeah. Just once again, watch the marathon. Donate. Nami's great. There's mine.
Watch the marathon. Donate. Nami's great. Also, volunteer and come on down. We want more people.
Mm-hmm. And as mentioned, if for any particular reason you can't go, we do have spots for remote volunteers. I'll give our quick, thanks to High Spirits, thanks Spike Vegeta for the call. Thanks so much again to Ashen for working on the tech side. Thank you very much to Heroic Spirit Gamer and Bob the Ninja Goldfish, who have helped with this show. They're valued members of our staff and helped us a little bit in planning and some ideas, and that we were doing a little bit of brainstorming a couple weeks ago on what we were going to do with this show. Hope we all enjoyed. I enjoy talking about video games. So,
Video games are cool. Nice being.
I heard RPGs are all right. They're all right with me.
And do we have any raid targets at this point? I'd like to do a raid.
Well, any gamers out there?
Hey, you throw that on us now? Like you couldn't give us like 5 minutes to look or something,
Go ahead. Look. Go like. I heard there's this awesome, handsome fella named Ghost Kumo who is currently not streaming, but you can send everybody over.
But we can send you all over there and we'll run some ads.
Awesome. All right. Thanks all for joining us.